The Select Committee on Youth Health and Safety will now come to order, and the clerk will please call the roll.
Thompson.
Here.
Hull.
Here.
Allison.
Here.
Capriglione.
Here.
Dutton. Ann Johnson.
Here.
Tracy King.
Here.
Landgraf.
Here.
Lozano.
A quorum is present. Anyone wishing to testify before the committee, please, 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 please register at the kiosk located in the hallway behind the hearing room. If you require assistance in registering, please contact the committee staff. I want to remind those witnesses who have registered that by filling out and submitting your witness affirmation form, you have agreed to give your testimony under oath. Members, we have a total of several witnesses who are registered to testify on the bills. Each witness will be given 3 minutes of excellent testimony that I'm sure you're going to all give us. I know some of you may have testimony in writing. You may not believe this, but we can all read. And if you want us to read it along with you, we'd be happy to do so. Try not to be repetitive. We're here to hear the testimony that you want to give us on these very important bills. We're grateful that you're joining us today. I respectfully ask our witness to adhere to our time limit, and please do not be repetitive if you can avoid it. Members, does anyone have any comments or questions before we begin? The chair lays out House Bill 4366 and recognizes author, Representative Howard. No, wait a minute, hold up. We got a seniority member before you. Gonzalez, I'm sorry. I apologize, Donna. The chair lays out House Bill 3898 and recognizes author, Representative Martinez, to explain the bill.
And good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair and members. House Bill 3898 proposes a pilot program to be administered.
Martinez, let me offer up your substitute.
Yes, ma'am.
Your committee substitute. The chair lays out a committee substitute and recognizes Representative Martinez to explain the substitute along with this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the substitute just changes the language from counselor to advisor. And House Bill 3898 just proposes a pilot program to be administered by the Texas Education Commissioner that would establish a life skills counselor program along the U.S.-Mexico border and the Gulf of Mexico. This bill was brought to us by the South Texas Youth Congress. They're a nonprofit club that started in 2013 to involve South Texas high school students with public policy. They have proposed a bill, and they really wanted to address some of these issues to the legislature. This life skills counselor would be a certified school counselor and required to collaborate with administrators, counselors, and social workers and mental health professionals and local law enforcement agencies to address student mental health needs. It establishes a voluntary counseling program for students on campus and to counsel students who have committed crimes of violence or are identified with mental health conditions. This bill would apply to the 14 counties covered by South Texas Youth Congress along the Texas-Mexico border, and in reviewing school safety issues, students from the South Texas Youth Congress quickly highlighted the need for additional counseling for at-risk or troubled students. And at this time, I'll entertain any questions.
Members, are there any questions? Okay, we reserve your right to close.
Thank you.
The chair call up Carrie Moore and Jessica Raleigh. You are?
Jessica.
Okay, Carrie Moore. All right, Carrie, we're going to let you go first. We show you as you are representing the Texas Education 911 Citizens Defending Freedom and yourself, and you are against the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you may proceed, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Happy Easter.
And the same to you.
I'm here against HB 3898, the Pilot Life Skills Counseling Program. Mental illness and I think crime are put together in this bill. We don't need students with mental health conditions mixed with students who have committed violent crimes. The bill calls for a voluntary counseling program for students, but I'm not sure who's volunteering. There's not enough parental discussion in this bill, and pulling parents into the discussion on how this would work and what this would look like. The counselor establishes life skill circle to assess the behavior of students if they are engaged in behavior that involves violation of school policy, and it requires involvement of law enforcement involving drugs or violence. If the students are involved in violence to such an extent that law enforcement is involved or is required, they shouldn't be giving circle time to discuss the incident with other students, letting them ask questions or to review evidence. This seems to violate the privacy of the perpetrator while also calling for the spread of tips and tricks. This program sounds like restorative discipline. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much. And Jessica Riley, we show that you are representing the Community Engagement National Association of Social Workers, Texas chapter, and yourself, and you are against the bill. You're neutral on the bill.
Neutral.
Neutral.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Jessica Riley, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the National Association of Social Workers, Texas chapter, testifying on HB 3898, representing myself and my organization. Firstly, we would like to express our gratitude to Representative Martinez and the civically engaged youth that brought forth this idea for the intent behind the bill. The mental and behavioral health needs of Texas students are apparent, yet currently underserved. Pilot programs such as this one are how we explore and uncover solutions to the complex issues facing youth today. Our association represents 5,200 social workers and social work college students across Texas, of which 300 to 500 serve in school settings. School social workers are an integral link between school, home, and community in helping students achieve academic success. They work directly with school administration, students, their parents, the rest of the family, to provide leadership in forming school discipline policies, mental health intervention, crisis management, and other support services. HB 3898 seeks to carry out many of the services aligned to the scope of practice for social workers, as defined in Chapter 505 of the Occupations Code. Section E of this bill text specifies the provision of instruction to improve emotional coping skills, counseling students identified as having a mental health condition or have committed a violent crime, and providing assessment, disciplinary recommendations, and intervention through the life skills circle. Social workers are uniquely trained and have credentialed qualification to deliver these exact services. However, licensed social workers do not currently exist as qualified life skills counselors or advisors through the program under Section D of the bill as currently written. While we recognize and appreciate the identification of social workers as collaborators to support the counselors and educators employed under this program title, we feel strongly that licensed social workers, being licensed bachelor social workers, licensed master social workers, and licensed clinical social workers, ought to be explicitly included as eligible counselors or advisors under this program. We have been in communication with Representative Martinez's office to provide language recommendations and look forward to continued collaboration. We urge the committee to approve a substitution relating to the inclusion of licensed social workers as defined under Subchapter A, Chapter 505 of the Occupations Code, and to support it thereafter. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Members, are there any questions? Representative Johnson?
If I can go back on the panel, Ms. Moore.
Ms. Moore, would you re-identify yourself so we know this testimony is coming from you?
Carrie Moore.
Go ahead.
Thank you. You mentioned restorative justice. Do you not support the concepts of restorative justice?
Everything I believe that should be in regards to justice should be on the merits of justice and not on anything else.
So, you know, the concept of restorative justice that's been working through juvenile courts or having an attempt to do something that can allow the parties to almost seek a mediation so that people are not being criminalized and reach some understanding about the consequence of the crime on the victim and how that impacted the defendant to have a better understanding of why they shouldn't do it again in the future. Do you agree with that concept?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not necessarily against restorative justice?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, and then my question, just to clarify on page 2, I understand what you're saying where it says committed a crime or having a mental health condition. Are you worried about mental health condition that's not defined, or what is it that is your concern? What populations do you think will get mixed?
I think both. I think there are stigmas with both, and so I don't think that I need to make sure that they are separate. that mental health conditions do not necessarily make criminals, and criminals do not necessarily have mental health conditions.
Fair. It seems to me, maybe in this language, that what Representative Martinez is trying to do is give two different definitions by which, if a school is experiencing challenging conduct with a student, that they can get them services. If the system is set up that way so that you have a wider net to bring people in, I completely get you wouldn't want disabled population with criminal population because that would need two different services. Are you okay with that concept if there's a filter to make sure it's not about disability or mental health and addressing the circumstances of a child just to give them a vehicle for services?
I think as long as parents are the number one contributor to that information, then I'm for whatever the parents want to do, as long as they are fully in the loop and spearheading the issue.
Thank you for your bringing up your issues, and I appreciate you walking through them with me. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Members, are there any further questions? Thank you very much. Thank you. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3898? If not, the testimony on House Bill 3898 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Martinez to close on his bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, and I close.
Members, do you have any questions of Representative Martinez? Thank you, Representative Martinez. Members, the chair moves to withdraw the substitute and leave House Bill 3898 pending. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The substitute is withdrawn and the bill will be left pending. The chair now lays out House Bill 4366 and recognizes author Representative Howard to explain her bill. I apologize for the mix-up.
No problem. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'm going to take a couple of minutes here to lay this out, if I might, please. Thank you so much for the opportunity to lay out House Bill 4366. The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted every aspect of our society and continues to influence our lives. However, the impact of the pandemic can be felt most among our youth, in which several studies point to a severe and persistent mental health crisis. In fact, every leading organization focused on this population has declared a mental health crisis for young Americans. In December 2021, the U.S. Surgeon General Murthy issued a public health advisory calling for immediate action due to the mental health crisis among youth. And these advisories are reserved for significant public health challenges that need immediate action. To put this crisis into perspective, the CDC estimates that 4 in 10 U.S. high schoolers experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness in 2021. CDC Youth Risk and Behavior Survey found in 2021 that 42% of high school students felt so sad or hopeless almost every day for at least 2 weeks in a row that they stopped doing their usual activities. The same survey found 22% of high school students seriously considered attempting suicide during the past year, and another 18% actually made a suicide plan. The pandemic's, though, not the only factor to consider. Behavioral and mental health issues among youth have been on the rise for the last decade. Estimated that persistent feelings of hopelessness and depression have increased by about 40% since 2011. So to put it simply, the kids are not okay. This is especially true for incarcerated youth. According to a study conducted by the Hogg Foundation, 70% of incarcerated youth in the United States have a mental health condition. Once incarcerated, youth have the potential to access healthcare services through a contract that we have with UTMB. But access to those services is largely dependent upon the availability of staff. This has led to, which there's not enough of. So this has led to inconsistent and in some cases non-existent access to services for many of the JJ youth. Once in the system, this lack of access to behavioral health services can not only exacerbate current issues, but can also lead to additional issues. This is most apparent when you take into consideration the high number of juveniles who were put on suicide watch while in TJJD's care. In 2022, 45% of those held in Texas juvenile lockups have been on suicide watch. This is a 12% increase over the last 4 years. Given the turmoil and chaos that has engulfed our juvenile justice system over the last decade, this increase is a sobering yet unsurprising fact. TJJD has had to grapple with staggering staffing shortages that have impacted every aspect of life in their facilities. In the last 5 years, reports of children held in detention for 23 hours a day has not been uncommon. We've all read the reports of the harsh and, in some instances, inhumane conditions in juvenile facilities. These conditions create a pressure cooker that can cause children to lash out while in detention, or in the worst cases, can lead to youth engaging in suicidal and self-harm behaviors out of depression, protest, or both. We obviously have to do better by our kids. If we don't, we will continue to see the recidivism rates go as high as a reported 75% for this population. HB 4366 would help break this cycle by focusing on the continuity of care among the JJ youth. It would require TJJD, in coordination with the DFPS, to not only screen every individual for eligibility in Medicaid, including Star Health, but to enroll them in those programs as well. I do anticipate having a committee substitute to include Health and Human Services as one of the agencies involved with implementing this bill. HB 4366 would prepare youth for release by allowing them to access telemedicine services through the program in which they are enrolled prior to their release, with the intention that they would hopefully be able to continue with the same provider after they're released, and requires TJJD to create a release plan to ensure the continuity of care for the youth after their return to their community. Finally, it requires TJJD to report back to the legislature how many children they enrolled, how many received services, and an explanation of why a child did not receive services. HB 4366 would lay the foundation for ensuring incarcerated youth can access the mental and physical health services they need to successfully reintegrate into society. These young people may have made bad decisions early on in life, but with help, they can have an opportunity to lead a stable and healthy life. HB 4366 is about giving these youth another healthier life option. So at this time, I'm happy to try to answer questions and reserve the right to close.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
The chair called Rachel Hampton. Rachel, we show you are representing the Lone Star Justice Alliance, and you are for the bill. Is that correct?
Yes.
You may proceed. You have 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you guys so much for having me. My name is Rachel Hampton, and I'm the Chief Mission Officer of the Lone Star Justice Alliance. You've heard an introduction and overview of our organization from my colleague Elizabeth Henneke, who has testified before you a few times, so I won't bore you with going through all of that again. We are a legal services nonprofit. We provide direct legal representation to juveniles in the state of Texas. HB 4366 promotes the mental and physical health of Texas youth by requiring Medicaid enrollment for eligible juveniles at both the county and state level. In 2020, approximately 75% of youth in juvenile care have a psychiatric diagnosis. In addition, youth within the juvenile justice system tend to be one of the most medically underserved populations, according to a recent report by the Kaiser Family Foundation. But let me give you a real-life example from our work. Maddie, whose name has been changed, is a sex trafficking survivor. She was committed to TJJD at the age of 15 after more than a dozen behavioral health placements, all related to the violence and rapes she was subjected to while trafficked. She was released at the age of 19 from TJJD custody without medical insurance coverage and without a clear plan to continue to access mental health treatments, making her more vulnerable than she'd ever been before. Maddie could have greatly benefited not just from early identification of Medicaid eligibility for prevention services, but also from pre-release Medicaid enrollment to ensure she was properly cared for upon release. Maddie is just one of hundreds of youth that have similar stories that would be served through this bill. HB 4366 takes a significant step toward addressing the physical and mental health needs of our most vulnerable youth in the state by ensuring benefits enrollments that bring prevention, stabilization, support, and continuity of care for justice-involved youth. In addition, this bill at its core increases the safety of communities to which our youth reside and which they return by ensuring that youth have access to the services and treatments they need for long-term success. This bill strengthens existing statute language, which at this time simply states that TJJD must check for Medicaid eligibility for youth in their care. However, when we requested numbers from TJJD for the total number that they had reviewed and the numbers that were found eligible, they were unable to produce these numbers for either their detention facilities or at the county level. HB 4366 takes the existing process one step further by requiring that all juveniles at county and state levels are not just reviewed, but that they are subsequently enrolled in the services for which they are eligible, including telehealth pre-release. Requiring that TJJD collect data on this process, as Donna Howard mentioned, bill has a low fiscal impact, and it can be supported through existing resources. In addition, this bill lays the groundwork for upcoming federal legislation, which provides a pathway to Medicaid services for youth in pre-adjudication facilities. This will be critical to your counties because it will reduce the amount of funds that county facilities are paying for mental health services by allowing them to access Medicaid reimbursement and waiver services. This bill is the most effective way to prepare for that
Thank you
legislation.
for your testimony. You are for the bill.
Yes.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 4366? If not, testimony on House Bill 4366 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Howard to close on her bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. If there's any other questions, I can try to answer them. Otherwise, I will close.
Members, are there any further questions of Representative Howard? Thank you, Representative
Thank you.
Howard. Members, the chair moves to leave House Bill 4366 pending. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The bill will be left pending. The chair lays out House Bill 3186 and recognizes author Chairman Leach to explain this bill. Chairman Leach, I'm going to ask Representative Lozano to offer up your committee substitute. And while you're explaining your bill, you'll also tell us what's in the substitute as well.
Great. Chairwoman Thompson, Vice Chair Hull, members, thank you for the opportunity to lay out House Bill 3186 in front of you today. Experts believe that youth diversion consisting of early identification and intervention is key to decreasing recidivism, reducing the level of system involvement, lowering long-term costs, helping youth and their families access needed services and programs, and importantly, reducing the burden on the justice system as a whole. The vast majority of cases in the Texas juvenile justice system are Class C, fine-only misdemeanors. Because the civil courts cannot accommodate the immense volume of Class C misdemeanor cases, municipal and justice courts have become the frontline responders for children accused of Class C misdemeanors. Many times these are crimes involving curfew violations, underage drinking, possession of drug paraphernalia, and other illegal behaviors. The focus of this bill, members, the committee substitute to House Bill 3186, is to increase opportunities for early identification and for redirecting children accused of many lower-level offenses. Madam Chair, the bill will work to identify at-risk youth, including youth living with mental illness, substance abuse disorders, and intellectual and developmental disabilities, and will make a referral to early youth intervention services and authorize diversion for certain Class D misdemeanors. Doing so will emphasize accountability and responsibility of the parent and the child, while at the same time promoting public and community safety. Further, the bill in front of you, members, will increase collaboration between governmental, education, and nonprofit organizations in devising regional strategies in both rural and urban settings. This will keep any fees to a minimum and only allow their use locally or regionally for youth diversion, and requires that an individual's inability to pay be considered, also allowing for the sharing of costs related to youth diversion through interlocal agreements. Finally, members, this bill avoids a one-size-fits-all approach, but at the same time provides the necessary framework for statewide implementation. The committee substitute in front of you changes the bill to allow for only one diversion agreement every 365 days. This mirrors driving safety courses and also teen court deferred adjudications. An individual would be eligible if they have any prior unsuccessful diversions. The substitute also, importantly, provides procedural changes for cases involving a child who's eligible for diversion that results in a trial that results in a guilty verdict, or if the evidence supports a finding of guilt, that in that case the child and their parents be given the opportunity to accept diversion placement. Pretty simple and self-explanatory, but I believe a simple bill with a powerful purpose, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Hull, and with that, I would ask for your favorable consideration. I'm, of course, available to answer any questions you have.
I love the way you stated a bill with a powerful purpose.
Simple,
Members, are
but
there any questions?
significant.
Okay, let me call the witnesses now.
Thank you, Madam
We
Chair.
have J.R. Woodley.
And I would request the
Kathleen,
right to close.
we reserve your right to close. Kathleen Person, Ryan Turner. Don't have another seat, do we, Chair? Judge, I see that you are J.R. Woodley. You are Justice of the Peace, and you are and Constable Association representative here, and you're representing yourself, and you are for this bill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You may proceed. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Dean. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to be here today. Chairman Leach did a great layout. The Justice of the Peace, as he said, the Justice of the Peace and municipal courts see a majority of these cases. We think it's a great bill. It's very well thought out, and as he said, it's powerful, and it's not too cumbersome. It's not overbearing. And I can tell you that a lot of work and over several years went into making this bill as good as it is. We, as the justice courts and the municipal courts, are in a unique position to positively affect some lives of these juveniles when they come before us. And if we can even affect 1% of the juveniles that we see before us in these instances, and we have a visible impact, it's better for those youth, it's better for their families, and ultimately it's better for the community. And we're in full support of this bill and the committee substitute.
Members, are there any questions of this distinguished Justice of the Peace, J.R. Woodley? I noticed you didn't bring the barbecue today.
I told you to stop by and we can get it.
Okay. Members, are there any questions? Okay, Kathleen Person, I see that you are a judge and you represent the TMCA and you are for the bill.
Yes, ma'am. And again, thank you to Representative Leach for laying out the bill so clearly. And thank you, members and Chairperson Thompson. I would say I like this bill. I have 16 years on the bench. I have 25 in law. I've prosecuted. I have defended. But the vast balance of my experience has been working with the citizens of my community. And I think probably the thing I would add, because I really think you did a great job there, Justice, I see young people very regularly. I have a very robust teen court. I've been really proud to have a teen court for 14 years. I see people that came before me before teen court existed, and there were really no tools. And I was reminded of this the other day leaving City Hall, because a student that had an alcohol problem, I saw him the first time and no intervention available. I saw him the second time. I saw him the third time. And now he taps on my window and asks for money, and he's really looking to be awarded. I mean, he really is so completely disabled by addiction at this point. Now, could I have helped? I don't know if I could have helped that person, but I know there are a lot of persons like him that we could try to wade in and see, can we help? I also live in a hospital community, and we have a tremendous impact on your ability to get licensed to work in a hospital community if you steal a piece of candy. But if you steal a car, that's a civil filing, and it's different. And you would get that license in the car scenario, but not in the candy bar scenario. I see that impact, and that really impacts our communities. It impacts our students. It impacts our youth. So those are the things that I think would be what I see boots on the ground that I wanted to relay to you that I think might need to be brought up today.
Members, are there any questions of Judge Person? Judge, we're delighted you're here with us today.
Thank you so much, and we hope that you report it.
Judge Ryan Turner, you are representing the Texas Judicial Council Youth Diversion Work Group, the Texas Municipal Courts Educational Center, and yourself, and you are neutral on the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm here as a resource. I think,
Okay.
keep this very short and simple. But
right.
I do want to talk about this as a project that it's been going on for 3 years. And this version of the bill, in my opinion, is the best version yet. This is what they really have done is there's been a lot of feedback from both chambers of the Texas legislature. So in the interim, the work group tried to incorporate all of the suggestions that we had from House members and from Senate members to address this. in a nutshell, you know, most people who go to municipal court are pro se. They typically don't have attorneys. We see a very amazing, a large number of children. The numbers are down, but we still see 36,300 children in non-traffic related cases. So the strategy of this is even if we could divert 10% of these kids, we have a lot of good programs in place in Texas, but the problem is they're on the back end. You have to be convicted or you have to be placed on it or deferred. This simply moves it to the front end, and it allows every part of Texas, doesn't matter if you're in Spearman or if you're in Houston, it allows everyone to look at a toolbox and to build the diversion plan that's best for them. And then it simply reallocates some pre-existing resources so that more things can be used with resources that we already have.
Members, are there any questions? Your testimonies have been excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I ain't pronounce her last name. Megan Lavoie. Megan, we show that you are representing the executive, you're the executive director, and you are representing the Texas Judicial Council, and you are neutral on the bill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Chairwoman Thompson, members, my name is Megan Lavoie. I am the Executive Director of the Texas Judicial Council, testifying here as a resource on the bill. You had 3 wonderful witnesses prior to me, so I'm here just to answer any questions that you have.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3186? If not, the testimony on House Bill 3186 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Chairman Leach to close on his bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. If there are no questions, I'll close.
Members, are there any questions of Chairman Leach? Members, the chair moves to withdraw the substitute and leave House Bill 3186 pending. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The substitute is withdrawn, and the bill will be left pending. The chair now lays out House Bill 2725 and recognizes its author, Representative Van Diva, to explain this bill. And Representative Lozano, would you mind laying out the committee substitute? Thank you. Representative, tell us about the bill and tell us about the committee substitute as well.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to lay this bill out. Back in 2015, we removed basically the teeth from the truancy laws here in the state legislature. That was my first session. And as a result, schools really have no way to compel students to attend school. And obviously, we know that.
Representative Van Diva, I know that you know what these teeth are, but for the purpose of the committee, would you tell us?
I'm sorry?
I know you know what TEKS mean, but for the purpose of the committee, would you tell us?
TEKS, okay, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills.
Thank you.
Yes. We know that schools cannot teach students who are not in attendance, and yet schools are held accountable for the performance of students who might miss hundreds of hours of instruction. In 2015, we had 23,455 students with 10 unexcused absence. That's 23,000. In 2021, we had 1,185,000 students, 321, with 10 unexcused absences. 3,800. So obviously, what we're doing is not working. And House Bill 2725 simply tries to put some tools in the toolbox for school districts to try to get these students back in school. The purpose, my purpose here is not to make things more difficult on parents. It's not to make parents owe a lot of money. It's simply to give schools the tools they need to get these students in school. And what this bill proposes to do is increase the penalties, the range from 100 to 500, increase it to a range of 400 to 800. These penalties can be waived if the parent attends parental class, the child obtains a high school diploma or a GED, or if the child enlists in the U.S. military. And another function of this bill would be that it will require TEA to collect truancy data. We back in 2015, when we removed the teeth from the truancy laws, we no longer required the collection of the data, and so this reinstates that. Madam Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Members, are there any questions? Okay, we reserve your right to close.
Absolutely.
Paul Hale, Laureen Johnson, J.R. Woodley. Judge. I guess Judge Woodley gave such good testimony, he just left. Okay, Laureen Johnson, J.R. Woodley. Lauren Johnson.
I'm her son. But
Pardon me?
I'm her son. She signed it and
Have you signed to testify? Have you signed up to testify?
she signed it.
Have you signed up to testify?
No.
Then you cannot testify until you sign up. Anyone who's wishing to testify for any bills, please go and sign up at the back of the room here at the kiosk. Lauren Johnson. Okay, Jordan Johnson. Have you signed up, Jordan? Evidently you have. I got your name. Come on. Thank you for joining us. All right, Jordan, we show that you are representing yourself and you are against the bill.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead. Tell us why.
My name is Jordan Johnson.
You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
I'm an 8th grade student at Daly Middle School. Thank you for your time. I'm here for the opposition of House Bill 2527 for truancy.
Now, we're not going to bite you, so just go ahead and tell us why you're against the bill.
I'm against the bill because being fined for school would most likely make it worse for not just the parents but also the kids. Because if they get fined, it would most likely make the attendance problem worse because most of the time the reasons for chronic absenteeism are varied as the challenges our students and families face, including poverty, poor health, lack of access of transportation, and lack of safety. So it would make the problem worse by making it harder for them to afford stuff like gas and car repairs, or if they have health problems, stuff like doctor visits or simple medications. Or any other troubles they have with any of that. Also, since the pandemic, it has also created a substantial increase in chronic absenteeism, absenteeism rate, criminalizing parents or punishing families whose children are absent from school is harmful and ineffective approach to addressing truancy. Punitive measures such as fines or criminal charges do nothing to address the underlying causes for chronic absenteeism and can exacerbate the challenges faced by students and families, leading to further disengagement from schools. 88% of families in my school district are economically disadvantaged, which puts them at a higher risk for being criminalized for truancy. So that would not be good. I would urge you to oppose this bill, and again, thank you for your time.
Well, you did wonderful. You were nervous. I know you were, but you did good. Judge J.R. Worley, you are representing the Justice of the Peace and the Constable Association and yourself, and you are neutral on the bill.
That is correct.
You got 3 minutes.
Hello again. Justice of the Peace and Constable Association is here because we are a resource. We hear most of the truant conduct and parent contributing to non-attendance cases in our courts. We wholeheartedly endorse the notion of not criminalizing truant conduct. However, we realize that students are not coming to court soon enough for us to be able to engage. We believe that schools should implement truancy prevention measures before they come to truancy court. And because every case is different that comes before us, each school year should be different, and each student should be treated on a case-by-case, school-by-school, and year-by-year basis. We support that House Bill 2725 does not criminalize the student. However, it does put a heavy burden on parent contributing to non-attendance to families that are typically already economically disadvantaged, and we don't believe this will increase compliance. We would recommend that the parent contributing be changed to a Class C, which puts the fine amount between $1 and $500 and allows us that discretion when they're before us rather than a staggered scale that may not be the best for the person that's directly before us. We have talked with Dr. Van Dever's office and look forward to working with him further on this.
Members, are there any questions of Judge Worley? Representative Lozano.
Judge, I have a question, and I had never really asked this. I've read it before in literature and in bills, but so what's considered a parent contributing?
So typically what you're looking at there is the younger students. You know, one of the ways we're taught about it is if a parent drops a 15-year-old off at the high school and they walk in the front door and out the back, that's really not the parent's fault because the parent made sure they were there. Elementary school level with the second grader, if the parent doesn't get them on the bus in the morning, it's the parent's fault, not the second graders. So that's kind of that differentiation there. It could still be filed on the high school age kids. It's kind of case dependent on what they're seeing. If the parents are contributing to them not getting there, the school district may want to go that route. But usually it's for the younger students because they aren't the ones that making themselves not go to school.
Okay, and then the judges are the ones that assess the fine? If there is a fine, do you take into account the financial needs of that family?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. For everything that's before our courts, we have several options that we have. You know, there's payment plans, community service, and even waiving of the fees if that's necessary.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Paul Hale, you're representing yourself and you are against the bill.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you,
Okay.
Ms. Thompson and Ms. Hull, for letting me testify and the whole committee. My name is Paul Hale. I'm from Queen City, Texas. That's in Cass County. And I am against this bill. And I am against it because of what's in our schools now. And I could be for this bill. At one time, I would have testified for it. But when I consider what I hear from teachers, my wife is one of those teachers, regarding the STAR testing system. The STAR testing system by itself is causing kids to consider suicide. And I've read a few articles where some of them have went through. Teachers are upset by it. Administrations don't know what to do with it, but teachers tell me, this is what they tell me. Instead of having time to educate our kids, we're having to teach them how to pass a test, and they're not learning what they came here for. And so I'll move on to the next thing. In Prosper, Frisco, and McKinney, excuse me, I didn't mean legislators, administrators are breaking the laws of Texas. And I would like to see that stop before I support a bill like this. Something like that, if a kid sees an administrator or a school board encourage a superintendent to break the law and then they do it, that confuses the child. There's pornography in school libraries, not just written, but explicit pictures. Some of them having boys having sex with one another in our school libraries. And then drag queens are being invited in to read it to them. Then we have students, and in some cases, coaches, bowing down and disrespected our flags. I see both of those flags up there, and I'm glad nobody disrespected them in this hearing, but it's happening in some of our schools. And I perceive that they do this because they've watched athletes on TV do it. But we teach them at home about God and respect and family and to salute these flags, but they go to school and they witness that. And then the TASB, the Texas Association of School Boards, the latest thing that they have thought of, it just appalls me that the best thing that they can come up with, the latest thing that they have recommended to our schools statewide is that boys should be able to go to the girls' restroom. And I wonder if they encourage that at home. Where did they come up with this stuff? So yes, you can change my mind to be for this bill if we can change all those things for the good that I just told you about. And I say that in all sincerity. I worry about our state's future.
Mr. Hill, have you had an opportunity to work with the author of the bill about your concerns?
No, ma'am, he wouldn't call me back.
Well, he's here in the room today, and I would he's right over there, and I would suggest that President Van Diva, would you give him a few moments of your time while he's here?
Okay.
Are there any questions of Mr. Hale? Thank you very much, and our star witness, Jordan Johnson, we thank you too. We have
It gets easier.
Lauren Johnson, Paige, Duggan Clay. That's it. I don't know if you're going to be improve upon your son, but he was great.
Thank you. I should have known going to the bathroom.
Yeah, that's okay. We were going to wait on you. All right, Lauren Johnson, I show that you are representing the ACLU and yourself, and you are against the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Lauren Johnson. I am here representing myself in the ACLU of Texas. We are in opposition to the bill, largely because of the high penalties and Section 1. A lot of advocacy organizations worked really hard in 2015 to decriminalize truancy because it was ineffective and for a variety of reasons. And we saw really good results from that for a while up until COVID. But I'm actually not going to talk about that. I'll leave that to Paige to talk about. I want to tell you a little bit about me. And back when Jordan was a little baby, I had one child that was in school, I had a toddler, and I had an infant. And my kid that was in school got kicked off the school bus for doing things that kids do on the school bus. And we were a one-car family that lived in an area where it was not safe for a young child to walk by himself to school. It was winter time. My husband had to be at work at 6:30 in the morning. And for us to get my son to school, it was just a huge wait at that time because we couldn't figure out a way to, I couldn't drop my husband off and then come back. We couldn't drop him off on the way because the school wasn't open yet. And so we wound up having to go to truancy court. And it wasn't because we were willfully keeping my son out of school. It was just that we were under a lot of different circumstances at the time and going through a lot of things. I did go and talk to the school. We wound up going to court, and there were a lot of parents there. Dealing with similar issues that had transportation problems or health problems or a variety of things. I was scared. Courts are very adversarial just by nature. But as I sat there scared watching everybody else took the mass plea deal and did whatever fine came with that at their own expense and at the expense of other things that they needed for their families. I knew I couldn't do that. And so I, in spite of my fear, spoke up and talked to the judge and told them what was going on, and we were able to negotiate something. I wonder how many of those other families didn't have the opportunity to negotiate something because being in court is a very intimidating thing, especially when it relates to being there because of your children. So I tell you that story. We made it. That kid just graduated and moved out on his own. But the families that don't know that they can speak up and fight back, that's what I'm here to talk about today. And so I'll pass it to Paige to give you all the more well-researched piece.
Members, are there any questions of Mrs. Johnson? Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
Paige, Duggan Clay, we see that you are representing the IDRA, and I'm going to ask you to tell us what that is again, and you are against the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Thompson. My name is Paige Duggins Clay with the Intercultural Development Research Association, testifying against the bill. I first want to start out by just thanking Dr. Van Dever. We had an excellent conversation with the representative staff where we were able to articulate our concerns, and we're very hopeful that we're going to work with staff to really address these. And so I wanted to first name that spirit. And there are 2 other bills today where members are working on this really important issue that we've had really productive conversations with, and I'm truly heartened by the willingness to hear stories of impact like you've heard today. We strongly oppose any effort to increase financial penalties for families. I've provided written testimony that's submitted on behalf of 5 organizations that have very diverse perspectives, but we really set a lot of the data about who the students are who are chronically absent based on state and available state and national data. And one of the critical issues is that we actually don't collect data on chronic absenteeism on a reliable basis in Texas. And there's some very good bills that this committee has heard. There are others that are moving that would address that. And so before we take any measures, particularly measures that research does show have this harmful impact, like financial penalties, we really ought to make sure we have a complete picture of who these families are, what the root causes are, and make sure that we've done everything possible to address those root causes before we increase financial hardship. You've heard plenty of testimony today about the fact that economically disadvantaged communities are the ones who are far more likely than others to experience chronic absenteeism and ultimately truancy. Students with disabilities, students who are pregnant. These are families that, students and families that really do need those extra couple of dollars. And I know for many of us, you're able to be here at the Capitol and testify and work on these really important issues. Maybe that's not a lot of money. I don't know, I work at a nonprofit, so a couple $100 is a lot to me. But for families that are really struggling to put gas in their car and pay for food and buy the clothes and school supplies, this increase in penalties really can be significant. We also are opposed to Section 1 of the bill, which would allow schools to skip implementing truancy prevention measures in successive school years. A family's circumstance can change in a matter of days, weeks, months, and we really, particularly before we escalate a family to higher fines and to court, we really ought to make sure that schools are doing everything possible to identify the root causes and have those conversations with families. Thank you very much. I think my time is up, but I'm happy to answer questions and to follow up with any office about some of the recommendations in our written testimony.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 2725? If not, the testimony on House Bill 2725 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Van Dever to close on his bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate most of the testimony that has been offered this afternoon, and certainly want to work with those who want to work with me on this, and look forward to that. As I said, this is not about making it more difficult on parents. It's not about costing parents money. If we're going to hold our schools accountable for the performance of these students, we need to give them the tools to get these students in school. That's the point of this bill. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, or I'll close.
Members, any question of Representative Van Dever? The chair hears none. Members, the chair moves to withdraw the substitute and leave House Bill 2725 pending. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The substitute is withdrawn, and the bill will be left pending. The chair lays out House Bill 3800 and recognizes author Chairman Ken King to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members, for the opportunity to lay out House Bill 3800. Currently, there's no statute that requires insurance plans to provide in-network benefits for mental health care professionals practicing within our school districts. House Bill 3800 will require insurance companies to be participating providers for mental health care professionals in school districts as long as those professionals meet all credential requirements and contractual terms set by the insurance or health plan provider. School safety is a paramount concern always, but particularly this session. The ability to use insurance to pay for mental health care will provide students with a greater sense of safety, security, as well as address the mental health needs of our most vulnerable. With that, Madam Chair, I'd stand for questions and respectfully ask for my right to close.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you. We'll reserve your right to close. Carrie Moore, Blake Hudson. Carrie was, oh, there she is. Mr. Moore, we see that you represent the Texas Education 911 Citizen Defending Freedom and yourself, and you are against the bill. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chairman.
Okay, you have 3 minutes to tell us about your position.
Well, I'm going to be quick. Happy Easter again. The highest purpose of our school is for learning. This is creating just another purpose for our schools. I think our schools are already spread very thin on the things that they are expected to produce. Our children can't read, they can't write, and we're just adding more and more to our schools. This is creating another purpose, which is mental health treatment. Kids are constantly being asked about their feelings, anxiety, and this legislation would create a fast track for kids getting into services. Parents should always be involved in the mental health treatment of their children. People do get locked up for mental health concerns, and involving schools more into this process is concerning as far as the role of parents and what part they play in it before a child gets services. Allowing an insurance to pay for a school-based mental health professional creates a captive profit center for mental health services. That's it.
Members, are there questions? All right, Mr. Blake Hudson, we show that you're representing the Texas Association of Health Plans, and you are against the bill.
That's correct. This is Blake Hudson, Director of Public Affairs for Texas Association of Health Plans. Regrettably opposed to the bill as filed, but do share concerns about bringing more mental health access to children. So some of our concerns just sort of fall into a workability category. So we're not really clear on how consent would work, for one, with providing these services at school. A lot of mental health services, when provided to minors, that there's a parent in the room, and clearly this consent requirements have to be met. I don't think that has been envisioned here just yet in this bill. So we're a little concerned about that. We're not sure if parents would come in during the day or sort of how these pieces would work. There's also a billing concern too in the commercial market, which the coverage for mental health in the commercial market is extraordinarily robust. We have a mental health pay parity law in Texas that says that your coverage for mental health in the commercial insurance market has to be as robust as the rest of medical care. So, but here's the other piece of it, and this is another workability problem. So only 17% of families are covered in health plans that are envisioned under this bill. So you're going to be creating a benefit in a school that a small segment of the kids would get, and the rest of the kids wouldn't get it. And you're actually creating it for the kids that already have really good coverage and are able to access that coverage outside of a school. We're not clear how billing would work, if the school would be billing and collecting copays and this sort of those pieces of this. We're committed to working on it and trying to address some of these concerns. But I do want to sort of point over to Medicaid for a second, because when you look at the commercial market versus the Medicaid market, the coverage for mental health services is a lot skinnier. There's really sort of, where in the commercial market you have a whole continuum of coverage that is a whole lot of there's a whole lot of coverage in between, just like a therapist visit and hospitalization. That's all filled in, but in Medicaid it isn't. So actually, and I will hand this out, this is a brief that we did about how the state can make some improvements on the Medicaid side. So I think the concept is a unique one. We have some workability challenges, but absolutely committed to bringing more healthcare services to our kids, and happy to take any questions.
Members, are there questions? Representative Hull.
Thank you. You were talking about the billing and stuff like that. Can you explain, I guess, would this require a family to provide your insurance info to your school, and then your school bills your insurance?
We're not clear about that. And again, these visits are typically going to have a copay or a metered deductible, and we're not clear mom would come up to school and kind of do all that at the school, is sort of how that would all work. But I think that's part of that lack of clarity is sort of part of our concerns.
I guess, so how would, if you didn't want to provide your insurance to the school, then how, I guess, how would that work with y'all being billed?
We aren't sure.
Okay.
Just to be clear. So, but I mean, I said presumably you could. I don't know if the school would be the provider, and they would contract to the as within the case of a school counselor, which this is not school counselors for the record. These are bringing psychologists into schools. I'm not sure if the school would contract and then they would bill that. But again, and I think this is really important and probably one of my biggest concerns about the bill. This is a benefit that only 17% of Texas families would have at their school. And it would be a challenge to sort of figure that out. And that's, you know from your time on the insurance committee that
It wouldn't apply to like the ERISA market? Like,
no, absolutely would not. That's correct.
So then, okay.
And that's the bigger piece of the market.
I see what you're saying. So then, let's say a kid is already, they have a private provider, insurance is paying for it, but then this was set up through the school, would insurance then continue to pay the private provider and this provider through the school?
That's correct. So there's nothing in here that would limit that benefit over there. And again, that's a robust benefit. So, and that's happening in a therapist's office or a psychologist's office off campus. And that's where we would happily look at that coverage and see if there was gaps that the committee identified in the commercial market. But I would say that with our mental health payment parity law, it is very robust coverage that we have in the state.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Any further questions, members? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3800? If not, testimony on House Bill 3800 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Chairman Ken King to close on his bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Briefly, I'm certainly willing to work with anybody as far as how billing would be worked out. But I think if you think about kids that play athletics, school districts don't pay 100% of that insurance if the family has insurance. It's a co-pay system, and I think mental health certainly could operate the same way. The bill doesn't actually speak to that. The thought was it would work like other co-pays, and as far as like 17% of the kids that get the benefit, what if the shooter in Uvalde had been part of that 17% and actually got the benefit? I think that's the larger point. I worry because when the witness talked about Medicaid being somewhat of a skinny benefit compared to private pay, what if there's no private pay? What if there's not even the skinny benefit? I think something's better than nothing. And I certainly get the billing and how that would work. That there needs to be some specifics worked out in the bill. But mental health is not going away, and it's something that every child should have the opportunity to have access to. And there's a lot of things our school districts provide today that we didn't provide when I went to school. And that I never would have thought we needed to provide, but that's where we're at in society, and so that's what the bill's about, And I know insurance companies typically don't want to pay for anything they don't have to, but this matters. So with that, I would stand for questions, and if not, I close.
Members, are there any further questions? Thank you very much, Chairman King. Members, the chair moves to leave House Bill 3800 pending. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The bill will be left pending. The chair lays out House Bill 3867, recognize its author, Representative Busey, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, for allowing me the opportunity to lay out House Bill 3867. This bill would direct public school personnel to perform a mental and physical health wellness check for students enrolled in special education after an incident of physical restraint. When students pose a threat to themselves or others, it can become necessary for school personnel to use restraint as a means of safety or to de-escalate an emergency situation. However, even when using safe techniques, the The use of restraint can be traumatic to students, and they may have continued stress, anxiety, or another emotional response after the restraint. Additionally, in many situations, students don't have access to a non-punitive or non-disciplinary adult, such as a school counselor or nurse, to debrief with after the incident. After conversations with stakeholders, the committee substitute, which is expected soon, would allow for the school personnel to complete the wellness check within a reasonable amount of time, and would expand the list of allowed school personnel to conduct the mental and physical health wellness check from a school counselor or nurse to other non-punitive school personnel, such as a licensed school psychologist, a teacher, and others, in order to lessen administrative burden on schools who may be understaffed. Additionally, it would direct the TEA commissioner to determine what appropriate assessments could be used for the wellness check for consistency across campuses in the state. A copy of both the mental and physical health screenings will be provided to parents after each incident alongside other required documentation. I want to thank you for hearing this bill. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I'd like to reserve my right to close.
Members, are there any questions? We reserve your right to close. The chair calls Quinn McCall, Stephen Alleman, Carrie Moore, Quinn McCall, I show you as representing yourself and for the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Thompson, Vice Chair Hull, and members of the committee. My name is Quinn McCall, and I am representing myself in support of HB 3867. I was a high school math teacher in Aldine ISD in North Houston for 6 years, and during that time, lucky me, I only had one fight in my classroom, just one. There were these two girls who very quickly, I was at the board, they started shouting at each other, started swinging very quickly, and I rushed over there, tried to restrain one of them. I had a football player help me grab the other, but they weren't completely separated, so I sent another student to go grab the school resource officer, help me out. Once they were separated, after the officer arrived, I saw one of the girls had basically a baseball-sized lump on her head because she had had her face smashed on a bookshelf. The two of them were removed. I spent about 30 seconds trying to resume my lesson, which, as you can imagine, did not happen with all the commotion. But another teacher came quickly because apparently the officer wanted me to write a statement in the office. When I sat down in the office to write, I noticed that my hands were shaking to the point that I had to sit and collect myself because having to break up a fight in your class, it's usually not part of the lesson plan, but I needed to collect myself. Aldine ISD has a zero tolerance policy for fighting. So these two girls were probably sent to an assistant principal. They were told that they were going to be sent to the DAEP. I did not see them for a month and a half. And that was that for them. They were probably put in school suspension for the rest of the day. I imagine that's what happened. The reason that I bring this up is because I'm a grown man. I saw what happened in class. I know why I reacted the way I did. And I was shook up. The AP who was sitting there and the resource officer asked me if I was okay afterwards because they saw that I needed to just take a second before I could even put pen on paper. But most of our students aren't afforded this luxury when they go through something like being restrained in class. A special education student who's restrained in class probably isn't aware necessarily of why they're being restrained or what part of their behavior led to that happening. We offer no such check-in with them after what's clearly a traumatic event for everybody involved. Being restrained puts a lot of fear and anxiety in persons, so the absolute least that we can do if a student is restrained in school is have a formal check-in with them led by an appropriately trained professional to ensure that their mental and physical well-being are taken care of. HB 3867 would ensure that special education students are afforded this care if they're restrained at school. And I support any legislation that looks after our students' mental well-being, especially that of our most vulnerable populations.
Members, are there any questions of Mr. McCall? Thanks. Thank you. Stephen Alleman, I show that you are representing Disability Rights Texas, and you are for the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
You have 3 minutes.
Very good. Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Alaman with Disability Rights Texas, here in favor of the legislation. Disability Rights Texas has long been engaged in issues around restraint of students with disabilities, and we're proud to have this legislation try to improve that process. I want to be clear that this legislation is not about stopping schools from using restraint when appropriate. It's rather about what happens after the restraint incident occurs and how to best ensure that the students with disabilities who were subjected to a restraint have their well-being protected and their ability to continue with public education ensured. So in short, we have about 35,000 incidents of restraint of students with disabilities that are reported by Texas Public Schools annually. That's a very large number. Some of those incidents occur very quickly and frankly, nothing comes of it. We know, however, of other incidents, quite sadly, that in fact, a few years ago, a student with a disability died after a restraint here in this state. So we do know that there needs to be an ability to make sure, separate from those educators who are involved, that someone checks the welfare of the student with a disability. It's as simple as that, making sure that a necessary restraint, though legal, nonetheless does not harm a student. And so we do support the legislation, and we're aware of the committee substitute. We believe it's moving in the right direction to balance the interests of students with disabilities and educators as well. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you. Carrie Moore, we show that you are representing the Texas Education 911 citizen defending freedom and yourself, and you're against the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
You have
Happy
3
Easter again for the 3rd time today. My name is Carrie Moore. I am the Education Division Leader for County Citizens Defending Freedom. I am also a member of Texas Education 911. We're very concerned with our schools, the school system, and the lack of our students thriving in the basics of all of the school subjects. I have a personal history of, I worked with MHMR for years. I did a lot of restraints, not in a school system, but in the real world system, which means Walmart parking lots in July in Texas. I also have a history in law enforcement. So I know what happens with a restraint. I know the emotions that run with these restraints when things, maybe through nobody else's fault, but just circumstances that happen. The concern with this bill, however, is although it is very important that to ensure, obviously, that the student is physically and mentally in a better place afterwards and is safe afterward, my concern is if these assessments are done too soon, when the heat and the emotion is still high, we could be ending up putting kids on a path of being put onto psychotropic drugs or institutionalized simply because they were screened before they had time to rationalize, to calm down. Doing a formal mental health screening after a student has been so upset that they've had to be restrained seems like it would guarantee to prove a false positive. Mental health screenings are a snapshot. They're not meant to be diagnostic, and yet too often they're treated as diagnostic tools. This bill seems to raise the risk that would occur. The right thing to do is to make sure a child is safe and then contact the parents with recommendations for an ARD meeting or modification to a child's behavior intervention plan if they have one. The wrong thing to do is to have to make decisions that may be irreversible, like assume a child should be screened for mental health problems when they've just been through a traumatic experience. So I'm just leery of making too big of assumptions too fast when the situation is still hot. So the time concerns are big for me.
Members, are there any questions? Vice Chair Hull.
Thank you. What would what would the time frame be that you would think would be more appropriate?
I think a physical assessment immediately is a good one. I think intervals an assessment pretty quick after, assessment a while later, days later, depending on the situation. But, when you're dealing with somebody who has blow-ups often, that's going to be different than somebody who is calm 99% of the time and then all of a sudden has something horrible and they snap, so to speak. I think that may look different. I'm just concerned that kids who may just have something else going on and don't need severe intervention could be led down a path that could be detrimental to them later on.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Members, are there any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Andrea Chevalier. Ryan Brown, Lee Spiller. Lee Spiller, we show you representing the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, and you are against the bill.
Yes, ma'am. And I believe that we're trying to get to the same place from two different directions is all. I think that following a restraint, the most important thing is, yes, assess somebody's physical condition, make sure they're safe. Make sure they're calm so that you're not going right back into the same problem. Once you start getting over into mental health screenings, I think that Ms. Moore was correct. You've got somebody who just went through a traumatizing, upsetting experience. It doesn't make sense to do a screening at that point. It's a lot like in the foster care world, there have been proponents of doing mental screenings shortly after a kid is taken from their parents. Well, in that case, of course, you're going to have an upset kid every time, right? I think that we could take guidance from the Texas Administrative Code for psych hospitals on what you do after a restraint, right? You make sure that the person is physically safe and that they're to a place of stability. If they're continuing to be restrained and continuing to have problems, this is a special ed kid. We would expect the special ed laws to kick in and the parent to be contacted and, things done with the parent's involvement and consent. That's all.
Members, are there any questions, Mr. Spiller? Thank you. Ryan Brown, we show that you are representing the University of Texas Dell Medical School, and you are neutral on the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So my name is Dr. Ryan Brown. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist with the UT Department of Psychiatry. I also work at Dell Children's Hospital with developmental disorder patients. The reality of the situation is that restraint is unfortunately a very real thing that we have to do in these moments of crisis. And for this population, developmental disorder patients, they are particularly at risk for both physical and emotional repercussions from those events. The interest in restraints stemmed from 1998. There was an article that came out that showed that there were 142 deaths of developmental disorder patients over the course of the year 1998. Since then, fortunately, we have decreased the number of restraints, the frequency, and have things like CPI and SAMA, which are both formal methods of training that encapsulate appropriate forms of restraint. The post-restraint physical examination is particularly important. We're laying hands on people who not only have developmental disorders, but may also have physical disorders that come along with the different genetic and other problems that may arise. The emotional assessment, I'm not here to test. I do not know the specific mechanism that is being proposed, and as far as I'm aware, there is not one. And so I cannot testify as to that point, but the intervention of physically laying hands on someone with autism spectrum disorder, for instance, is a traumatic experience. And doing a assessment in an appropriate time frame with a developmentally appropriate method would likely lead to improved mental health as well as physical health outcomes. And that's all I have to say.
Members, are there any questions of Dr. Brown? Thank you very much. And Andrea Chevalier, you're representing the Texas Council of Administrators of Special Education, and you are neutral on the bill.
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, late afternoon. Dr. Andrea Chevalier with TCASE. Yes, we are neutral on the bill and want to first appreciate Representative Busey and his staff and the intent of the bill. I think it follows best practice to prioritize the well-being of the child. I think it's been mentioned this evening as well that restraints are not meant to harm students, they're meant to keep them safe. And in some cases, a restraint can be a form of comfort to the child. If you think about like a bear hug, that would be a type of restraint that could be used, for instance, in the CPI protocol. We have shared thoughts with Representative Busey's office, and like I mentioned, I think that this follows best practice, so just wanting to ensure as it moves forward that what is laid out in the bill, like reasonable amount of time, that all of those things would not conflict with so if a district was following the CPI protocol or the SAMA protocol, that this bill would not conflict with that and create any additional undue burden that's inconsistent with what they're already doing, which is a best practice. We've also shared thoughts related to just kind of a concern with if a staff member is not available to do some of what the bill asks, but then we have data related to that and it shows that the district didn't do something. Want to make sure that there's some ability maybe for the district to document like a reason code or something like that, like we don't have this person on staff, just so that we can have some context for that data. And also what's been mentioned about sort of the reasonable amount of time for the screenings to be completed, I think is also some good points have been raised. The physical well-being check obviously should be done immediately and concurrently with the practice of the restraint or containment. The mental health screening, you will probably need to wait for some re-regulation of the child for that to be more accurate. So, thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much. Tatiana Alfano. I show that you represent yourself and you are for the bill.
Yes, thank you. My name is Tatiana Alfano and I am for the bill. I'm a parent and an educator. My son was abused during a restraint. He was thrown violently into a wall by his school principal. The whole thing was caught on camera. And my son made an outcry multiple times of the abuse during the restraint. In addition to the abuser, there was 2 witnesses. It wasn't reported for over 2 weeks, despite my son's outcry. And he's verbal with disabilities. It took 2 weeks of me pressuring the school to do the investigation for one to be completed. Just to be clear, there was no repercussions for any staff member in that incident. There is the fox guarding the hen house. There was no one to protect my son in this instance. There needs to be more checks and balances so that children before, during, and after a restraint are protected, and that they have, should they even have voices, have their voices heard. Their mental health, their physical well-being needs to be ensured, and it wasn't in my son's case. And I know, and others in my community too, because they've reached out to me to tell me, and I'm speaking on their behalf.
Members, are there any questions? We're sorry about your situation of your child. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here wishing to testify for, on, or against House Bill 3869? If not, the testimony on House Bill 3869 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Busey to close on his bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate y'all hearing this bill. I appreciate the witnesses. You know, what we do is we direct the TA Commissioner with a reasonable amount of time for these to be done, and for them to come up with that timeline, we'd be happy to keep fleshing that out. But I think, we didn't direct it directly. We gave it to that commissioner to work with experts to figure that out and make sure it's a consistent process across the state. And that's our goal here. You heard from witnesses. We want to make sure these kids, we understand this has to happen sometimes. We want to make sure when it does happen that these assessments are done and that parents and everybody knows what's going on.
Members, are there any questions of Representative Busey? Members, the chair moves to leave House Bill 3867 pending. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The bill would be left pending. I saw Representative Lopez, but here she is. The chair lays out House Bill 3833 and recognizes Representative Lopez to explain her bill, and I'm going to lay out your committee substitute. And while you're explaining your bill, would you also tell us what's in the substitute?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chairman Thompson and committee members. I really appreciate your time today. And so I'm a former school counselor as well. Now I'm a licensed counselor myself. I was the director of our counseling program in our school district. And so just wanted to give you a little bit of background of where this bill is coming from, also from personal experience of things that I dealt with in the school district. And so the substitute on 3833 has a change on number 1 where we're adding the school counseling program so that counselors are able to implement a school counseling program, not just guidance. Guidance, the difference between counseling and guidance is just like classroom lessons. Let's talk about feelings and, simple examples like that. But the school counseling program also allows the counselors to provide social support, emotional support, as well as academic support for the children. And then on the B section, we added engaging harmful behavior towards self or others, to specify to school counselors that this is a duty that they have, that if there is a child that is saying they're going to harm themselves, whether they want to commit suicide or if they want to hurt someone, if they want to kill someone, they want to beat up someone, that the counselors are required to see the children that are expressing these thoughts. So that's part of the substitution. And so I just wanted to come by today and appreciate your time, like I said, to discuss about the crucial role that our counselors play in schools. And it is very important that they address any issues that our kids have when it comes to mental health. Mental health issues are becoming increasingly prevalent, unfortunately, among the young people. And school counselors are more than qualified to provide the services and the support that the kids need in the schools. However, despite this importance, the current education code does not make it a responsibility for counselors to aid students with their emotional development. This is significant because our students are not just academically driven, they're also emotional. They're human beings, and it's important to address that in House Bill 3833, and that's what I'm here to do today. So House Bill 3833 is a crucial step in fixing this issue. This bill recognizes the importance of school counselors in supporting the holistic development of students by ensuring that they counsel students to fully develop each student's academic, career, personal, social, and emotional abilities. They are also responsible for looking out for students who are at risk of dropping out of school, becoming substance abusers, participating in gang activity, or committing suicide, as well as those who may be at risk for choosing unhealthy or inappropriate solutions to their problems or engaging in harmful behavior toward themselves or others. The impact of this bill cannot be overstated. By empowering our school counselors to provide comprehensive support to students, we can address their mental concerns before they become severe and ensure that students have the resources they need to successfully succeed academically, socially, and emotionally. However, passing House Bill 3833 is just the first step. We must also ensure that school counselors have the training and resources they need to provide effective support to our students. This includes investing in counseling programs, providing ongoing professional development opportunities, and addressing the stigma around mental health in our schools. In conclusion, school counselors play a crucial role in identifying and addressing mental health concerns among our students. Passing House Bill 3833 is an essential step in ensuring that every student receives the support they need to succeed academically, socially, and emotionally. So together this session, let's work to prioritize the emotional well-being of our students and create a better future for them.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you. We'll reserve your right to close.
Thank you, ma'am.
Carrie Moore, Monty Crow, Jill Adams. Monty Crow, I show that you are Manya. I apologize. Manya Crow. I show that you are representing the Texas Counseling Association and yourself, and you are for the bill.
I am.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I am Anya Crow on behalf of the Texas Counseling Association, and I am here in support of this bill. There's been a lot of mention made today about parents taking care of things at home, things should be taken care of at home, and my question to that would be, what about those that don't? In the school setting, we do not ask our kids, nor should we ask them to separate out the pieces of themselves to academic, social, and emotional, and leave out the pieces that we don't want to address at school. They come to us as the whole child, as they should. I want to share with you a story of a student I'll call Jeff, who walked into his school counselor's office this week to talk through course registration. And in the course of the conversation, he said, "Ms. Jones, can you stop? I have to tell you something." She said, "Of course, Jeff." And he said, "It's too much. The pressure at home, the pressure at school, I can't do it, and I'm thinking of suicide." In the course of the conversation, because of course she shifted to the emotional needs of this student, she said, "Have you shared this with anyone else?" And he said, "I did. I shared it with my parent." And he said, "You keep saying that. Do it or don't do it. Just stop talking about it." So for that reason, it is vital that counselors be permitted and encouraged to address the emotional needs of students, because not everyone has parents at home to work through skills on emotion regulation or personal problems. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Jill Adams, I show that you are representing the Texas School Counselors Association as well, and yourself, and you're for the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
3 minutes.
All right, my name is Jill Adams, and I am serving as president-elect of the Texas School Counselor Association. I'm also a 24-year educator. I am for House Bill 3833. And what I hope to bring to you today is a little bit of hope. We've heard staggering statistics about the state of mental health for our kids and our families. Person after person has come up and talked about the struggles that our families are having, our students are having, and the hope in this situation is that we already have people in our schools equipped and positioned to serve these kids and families. Just as a quick reminder, school counselors have a master's degree in counseling. That includes training in child development and theoretical and behavioral approaches, professional skills, and then the Texas model. The Texas model for school counseling provides framework so that schools can truly serve the needs of the whole child in the community. Additionally, when we think of school counselors, they tend to be put into two buckets. One bucket is their academic counselors, and they do schedule changes and talk about college and classes and grades. Some people look at school counselors and think they just run around and respond to crises all the time. And the truth is, yes, they do both. Just like Ms. Crow shared, our students are coming to us and they're talking to their counselors about, I'm failing grades. And in the course of those conversations, we find out things like there's abuse at home. My parents kicked me out of my house. We're living in our car. And our school counselors truly are uniquely positioned and equipped to be able to support students, because our number one goal in schools is to make sure our kids are ready to learn and thrive in their future. Supporting House Bill 3833 further articulates the roles and responsibilities of a school counselor, and I think more importantly, it articulates it for our school community, including administrators at the campus and district level, as well as our parents, to understand that we are there as educators to support our students in academic, social, and emotional. It is hopeful because we know that all of these positions are in place and they are working very closely with teachers, parents, community members, administrators to make sure that our students are thriving. So, thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you. Carrie Moore, we show that you are representing the Texas Education 911 Citizen Defending Freedom and yourself, and you're against the bill.
I need to change, that needs to be on the bill, comment on the bill.
Okay. Would you give us permission to change your position from against to on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Just give us a moment. Okay. We show that you're neutral on the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's correct.
3 minutes.
I would like to take this opportunity to address our school counselors and the immense responsibility that they have. I have known people in my life who had horrible home lives, but their only respite was to go to school and not discuss it all day long. So we do have another side of this, of people who the only love and attention that they get is from their teachers and their counselors, and they just want to make them proud. I know that the person of whom I'm speaking would not have become a psychiatrist later in life if he had had half of the social emotional stuff that we do in school today, because that was his only chance. And that's why he decided to, he graduated summa cum laude from A&M. He went on to become a psychiatrist, and it was because he had that opportunity to go to school, be a regular kid, and his biggest problem was math at school. My concern with this bill is that while it doesn't call for blanket counseling of all students, we have concerns about school counselors' duties expanding further and further into the provision of school-based mental health services. And I'm concerned, but I have concerns that I think I can discuss with the author, if that's okay.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3833? If not, the testimony is closed on House Bill 3833, and the chair recognizes Representative Lopez to close on her bill.
Thank you very much. Once again, I come to you, members and chair. I do ask for your support in this bill and passing this bill to the full House so that it can be voted on as well. As I mentioned, as a former school counselor myself and director, and knowing the law and what's in place for counselors, this bill will only solidify that counselors should be seeing these kids so that we can prevent further problems. One, so we can save lives. Two, so we can prevent children hurting other people and include their classmates and so forth, or just anybody in general. But at the same time, this is not adding more work to the counselor. It's just saying that they do have this obligation that's already in place. We're just putting it in black and white, which will help them also to advocate for the children, to be able to say to their administrator, I know that you want me to get this paperwork done, but by law, I have to make sure that I see this child first. Doesn't mean they're going to neglect anything else. It just means that The student safety will come first, the counseling will come first in this situation, and in the session 87 with Senator Lucio, there was a bill passed also that said that counselors have to spend at least 80% of their time working with children, whether it's with guidance lessons, whether it's individual counseling, and so forth. If the counselors are not doing that, then they have to let TEA know why they're not doing that. What is the reason? So this is just, again, it goes back to, this is an obligation that counselors already have, where this is just going to help the counselors to advocate for the children. I thank you very much for your time.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much. Members, the chair moves to withdraw the substitute and to leave House Bill 3833 pending. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The substitute is withdrawn. The bill is left pending. The chair lays out House Bill 3570 and recognizes Author Representative Schatzline. I know I didn't pronounce that correctly.
No, that was perfect.
To explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairwoman. You are the first time.
Representative Hub, would you lay out the committee substitute to House Bill 3570? Thank you. Representative, would you tell us about House Bill 3570 and the committee substitute that is offered up by Vice Chair Hull?
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you for getting my name right. You're the first chairwoman to get my name right, or chairman. So
I was struggling.
It's a tough one. But again, thank you, Chairwoman, again, and Vice Chair Hull, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce House Bill 3570, which is the adult website age verification, which seeks to protect minors by requiring age verification by state ID to access adult websites. Louisiana recently passed the first age verification legislation aimed at adult websites in the U.S., which is what we have based this bill on. House Bill 3570 requires verification of age by state-issued ID to access any content on websites that host content not including search engines, internet providers, or cloud providers. Men and women are being exposed to pornography at younger and younger ages. Pornography exposure warps the young mind, causing not only severe addiction, but also an unhealthy relationship with the opposite sex. House Bill 3570 draws from recently passed legislation in Louisiana to establish critical barriers to the access of pornography and other explicit material by minors. This legislation is monumental in the fight against the exploitation and sexualization of children. On day one of this bill being effective in Louisiana, Pornhub and other major websites implemented age verification technology without the need for a single lawsuit to be filed, which shows that this law will have a significant effect on protecting our children, and it's time that Texas adopts this as well. The committee substitute for the bill makes several changes. First, the substitute removes the 1/3 adult content threshold for a website to be held liable. Secondly, the bill adds in a 45-day grace period for social media companies to identify and implement age verification on sexual content. Because of the volume of material these companies see posted on a daily basis, we thought it best to allow some short period of time where they can flag this material so as not to unfairly punish those companies for user-uploaded content while still providing an incentive to protect children from harmful material. Removing the 1/3 content threshold was a very intentional change for me because according to a 2019 study, over 62% of 11 to 13-year-olds who had seen pornography reported that their first exposure to it was unintentional. These children were not looking at the major pornography sites. They were likely visiting familiar sites for innocent reasons and happened to stumble upon the content there, including social media apps as well. More than half of American children own a smartphone by age 11, which is terrifying. A study of university students found that 93% of boys and 62% of girls had seen internet pornography during adolescence. And a meta-analysis of 37 studies found that exposure to violent or rape pornography increased a child's odds of experiencing sexual exploitation by nearly 3 times. Additionally, research shows that children are more susceptible than adults to addictions and to developmental effects on the brain, and preventing this first exposure to harmful content is just as important as preventing future exposure to more mainstream websites. And I think the statistic shows the need for all companies to require age verification if they choose to host any amount of adult content. You know, I spent nearly a decade with adolescents, with at-risk kids, as a football coach, as an educator, and as a mentor in at-risk student programs throughout public schools. One thing is very clear is that there is an increase of pornography usage. We would see it sometimes with students had their phone out in the classroom. And as we would see this, we would also see that almost every behavioral issue we dealt with specific students, there was a direct correlation to a desensitization for things that actually matter, such as pornography. They would openly talk about it in class. This was something that was readily available to them on their smartphone right in front of them. I know I'm not sharing any new information on that, but I think it's important to recognize that this is prevalent. It's in front of us. There are some incredible bills that are attacking this session. I believe that this is one of them. Members, I imagine a Texas where young men show honor towards young women. I imagine a Texas where access to obscene materials is not readily available with one click away. I imagine a Texas where young women know that they are protected from sexual violence, where they don't have to compare themselves to other people, but they can know when they look in the mirror that they were beautifully and wonderfully made. I imagine a Texas where young women and men are not exposed to material that normalizes obscene behavior, so that we can take one step further in ending sexual violence that is running rampant in the next generation. So members, at this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and if there are none, I would like to reserve my right to close.
Members, are there any questions? We'll reserve your right to close. Terry Schilling, Brianna Elder, Carrie Moore. Carrie, you just supposed to stay up here.
I brought a chair.
Terry Schillings, I show that you are representing the Americans Principal Project and for the bill.
Yes, I am.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mrs. Chairwoman. My name is Terry Schilling. I'm the president of American Principals Project, where we work to make the family the most powerful special interest group in the country. We are urging support for HB 3570 because it gives power and more control to parents over what their children are able to access online. 26 years ago, that's when the ACLU versus Reno case with the Supreme Court struck down the only law to protect children online from pornography through the Communications Decency Act. The internet has changed a lot since then. It's gotten faster, it's gotten stronger, it's gotten more interesting, and it's gotten more weird. This legislation seeks to push back against decades of unrestricted access to pornography and growth online for children. This legislation is not the only legislation that's been passed in this country. Right now, we're up to 5 states that have passed this legislation, including Louisiana, which was signed into law by a Democrat, Arkansas, Mississippi, Utah, and also Virginia, where it passed with supermajorities in both the House and the Senate. The case for legislation like this is obvious, especially in an age where the average age of first exposure to pornography online is 11 years old. So rather than making the positive arguments that Representative Schatzline has already focused on, I want to focus on some of the things that have come up as objections to other pieces of legislation that we've supported. The first is privacy. All across the internet today, we have lots of adult entertainment and lots of adult activities and products that require age verification. We have had 0 problems or complications when it comes to verifying the age of people for online sports betting, online alcohol sales, even online marijuana sales in some states like California. We have had no issues with privacy problems. The second objection that comes up is that it's very hard to define what is pornography. This bill states out what that is. However, I would argue that in the ACLU versus Reno case, the Supreme Court gave us a blueprint for how to protect children online from pornography, and this bill fits that to a T. Essentially, the FCC and lots of other regulators have already defined what pornography is and how to keep it off our broadcast television. The third goes back to the other point about privacy, which is that it's hard to implement. It's actually very easy, and it's already being done for lots of other adult entertainment online. And with that, I'll close.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you. Brianna Elder, I show that you are representing Unbound Now, and you are for the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Brianna Elder. Thank you all.
Unbound Now Austin.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
and you for the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
3 minutes.
All right, thank you. So thank you all, Chairwoman and everyone else for allowing us to come out. Thank you, Representative, for eloquently hitting all the points. I work for Anti-Trafficking Agency, and I want to take a moment to talk about how this bill will interact with that. Porn is often used as grooming tactic from traffickers, predators, used as a way to desensitize youth. So another aspect of it is a lot of the porn that is online or made available is a product of trafficking. So we talk about privacy of those who are consuming the product, and I want to bring up a point of privacy for the individuals who are being displayed, recognizing that they sometimes do not have consent to be filmed, consent to be displayed in a public matter. Also, I want to hit the developmental piece of minors consuming these kind of materials, the way that it affects their brain development, and just kind of sets the trajectory of the way they view relationships, they view themselves, they view interactions with others. I've looked at studies. There's the Youth Pornography Addiction Center in Utah, and they have extensive research that looks at people, adults who have porn addiction, and recognizing that many of them became addicted as a minor. And so I think this bill is really great in being proactive. If we know that these people are being exposed at a young age, why are we not doing what we can to prevent their access to this and limiting as much exposure as possible? As we've talked about, so many youth have technology at school, at home, and so I think this bill does a really good job in protecting what we can to prevent children from stumbling upon these kind of things. Also, just talking about the struggle that children have with porn and sexual addiction. As I think this bill, if passed, hopefully will do a really good job of preventing future abuse from both children and adults. So thank y'all for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Members, are there any questions? Carrie Moore? We show you a representative, Texas Education 911, Citizens Defending Freedom, and yourself, and you're for the bill.
Yes, again. I want to thank Representative Schatzline for this bill. Our children, as I think we can all agree, they need and they crave boundaries. Children who grow up being able to run amok without boundaries do not grow up into healthy, happy adults. These kids already have social media that show them plenty of the negative sides of society. They have friends who have older siblings who know how to get around these things. We need to commit to creating as many boundaries and helping those kids feel as secure as possible, knowing that there's right and wrong. Today, we are conducting an investigation, so to speak. We are collecting information from across the state regarding the certification holders' misconduct reports that are not being reported properly. Our lines between proper adult and proper child relationships throughout society is being blurred more and more, and it's because of things like porn sites. It's because of things like social media, pornography in our library books, pornography in our comprehensive sex ed, and well-meaning nonprofit curricula will have links sometimes to things that this would at least prohibit them from having one or two clicks away from some pretty disgusting and inappropriate, unhealthy things for children to see and to try to live up to those expectations in life. We need to help. There was a news story I saw the other day about second graders engaging in oral sex. This is unacceptable, but it's not. I'm afraid the problems here are not just from one angle. It's many angles, and we're just over-sexualizing children, period, from beginning to end. They don't have a chance to have their childhood, and we see them as they get older regressing, dressing like children, wanting to behave like children. I know someone who was raped. It was her first time. She suddenly started reverting and dressing like a 7-year-old. And she acknowledged that that was why. It was because she doesn't have enough, she didn't have her childhood. She had it taken from her. And over-sexualizing children does not give our children the boundaries to know what they're looking at is wrong, what they're seeing is wrong, what somebody is coming to them and asking them to do is wrong, what their teacher wants to talk to them about is wrong. We are erasing that line so that they're born with that natural inclination. I'm not ready to discuss this topic. Thank you.
Ms. Moore, thank you so much. Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Paul Hale, Servando Espraza. And Deborah Simmons. Mr. Hale, you're still with us, and we thank you, and we show you a representative, Paul Hale. You're representing yourself, and you are for the bill.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you for
You
having
have
me.
3 minutes.
Yes, ma'am, it won't take me that long. This one's
Okay.
easy. And I'm supporting it for all the obvious reasons. I'd like to thank our legislator, Representative Nate Schatzline, I think I got that right, for bringing this. And to me, it demonstrates what leadership is all about. He's recognized a problem that's not only in 1 or 2 or 10 or 100 communities. It's infested our society statewide and nationwide. And this is the first step in dealing with that thing online. You know, I've got a desktop and a Chromebook both, and I look at things. I'm an adult, I'm 58, and it's hard for me to get into things that have nothing to do with that. You know, passwords, an easy setup to deal with. And we've got proof with the things that we deal with every day on the computer of how to do this. And I read his bill. I didn't understand all of it. I understood most of it. And what I mean by I didn't understand all of it was some of it was a little over my head legally. But it looks like he thought of everything. I support it. My family supports it 100%. And I ask the committee to vote for it. And I thank y'all for letting me testify today.
Members, are there any questions of Mr. Paul Hale? Thank you. Okay, Deborah Simmons, I show that you are representing yourself, and you are for the bill.
I am.
And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Deborah Simmons, and I am for House Bill 3570 to require reasonable age verification methods for social media platforms and internet websites. Thank you so much for hearing this bill. As a mom with 10 years experience in the IT industry, I was alarmed when I became aware of the porn industry targeting minors online, particularly in schools. I used my technical skills to research accessibility of sexually graphic images, explicit text, and embedded hot links in databases and portals, often using VPN access to emulate the average customer experience. Filters are inadequate to anticipate and prohibit access to every new website, every online environment, and each hot link embedded in what is marketed and curated as safe portals for K through 12, including hot links to actual porn sites. The peddlers of pornography, child sexual abuse material, and obscene content do not have boundaries in their efforts to expose children and corrupt their young, impressionable, and innocent minds. The Free Speech Coalition, representing the adult entertainment industry, aligns in coalitions such as the National Coalition Against Censorship to fight all efforts to protect children. This legislation provides provides necessary safeguards that the industry and their allies refuse to do voluntarily. The essential criteria should be to protect minors, do not be persuaded by the false accusations of censorship and guarding of First Amendment rights, nor the technical challenges. The focus of this legislation is, as it should be, to protect minors. Texas has a compelling interest to protect minors, and we applaud the efforts of the 88th legislature to pass each and every piece of legislation to that end. Age verification on adult websites is a necessary and powerful solution. Please pass HB 3570. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Well, we're, Mr. Esperanza, we are with you, and you're representing the TechNet, and you are neutral on the bill?
Yes, ma'am.
So you give us your name, and you may proceed.
Yes, thank you. Chair Thompson, Vice Chair Hall, and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Servando Esparza. I'm Executive Director for TechNet at the Southeast Region. I'm testifying on the bill. I'm testifying on because TechNet is neutral on the bill as filed. One important provision in that filed bill is that it has an applicability threshold of 33% or 1/3 of more content, harmful content, means that you have to essentially put this age verification, which the way it works in Louisiana, it requires you to scan your driver's license. It was previously mentioned that the same identical bill has been passed in Louisiana. It's where it started. Virginia, Utah, Mississippi, and did I say that? All of them? Arkansas. They've all included the 33% threshold. I believe the author was trying to figure out either you're in the threshold and you have to put this age verification process in place, or you don't. A couple of other bills are moving through the process. Representative Shaheen has a very similar bill with the threshold, has moved out of, I think, Judiciary, and then Senator Paxton's almost identical bill with that threshold has passed Senate State Affairs. So our ask is that that threshold be included back into the bill. Thank you.
Members of that question. Representative Johnson?
Thank you very much. Servando, I keep seeing you. We keep doing this. He makes a very fair point. If you walked into the 7-Eleven and there was a nudie magazine, it would be in plastic and there'd be a cover so that kids couldn't see it. Why is the industry not self-regulating itself on this?
Well, let me take the first example that you mentioned with the cover. That's essentially what the bill's trying to do. We're trying to limit to those sites, to those, magazines that you're talking about, but that shouldn't apply to every single magazine that might have questionable material. And that's the idea behind this bill in Louisiana. On the second part that you mentioned about the self-regulation part, the balance in part of this is, and I was not the author, and we worked with the author in Louisiana on this. What she was trying to balance was, I believe there was a bill that was previously filed in Louisiana that sort of did something like this. It was sort of in this scope that was then challenged in court, I believe, under First Amendment rights. The author was trying to balance those things of something that's legal and something that is practicable that could really put that age gate in those adult websites that could go into effect. And we believe because it went into effect, wasn't challenged in court, that model is a good example to sort of take a look at of something that could function. So it's trying to take up all those balances.
So I worry about this 33% or a third, because if you tell people they can't sell 5 e-vape pens, they'll sell 4. Again, on the concept of self-policing your behavior as social media or internet companies, do you, in your experience, find that those that are doing true pornography would meet this threshold and require the ID verification? Or do you think that we would see folks that would say, okay, let's cut this video so it's 31% of the content?
I would say the way it was implemented in Louisiana, I think when it went into effect, I believe January 1st of this year, that you saw that immediate take effect. I don't know exactly if like everybody's compliant with it, but there are eligible to be sued if they're not compliant. But we saw that effect. We saw a bunch of news articles about, did you know this bill passed a couple months ago, take effect? So we know it's an effect there.
So if you know the answer, because I didn't see it in here and I was going to ask Representative Schatzline, what is the enforcement mechanism on this? Is it civil liability?
I believe in this bill, let me make sure in the sub, that wasn't changed. I believe it's a civil. Yes, it looks like it's liability there.
And then let me ask you this question, because I've heard this come up in another hearing about forum selection clauses. What would need to be done to make sure that the civil enforcement and civil liability to ensure that Texas law would apply? What would need to be done to ensure that a company couldn't claim, well, the rules that are going to govern this application or your use of this application are going to be state of California, state of Colorado? How do we ensure that Texas law applies in each of these circumstances?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not an attorney, but I promise to come back to you with that response to the entire committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Members, any further questions? Thank you very much. Fran Rhodes, Jonathan Covey. Fran, we show that you are representing the True Texas Project and yourself, and you are for the bill.
That's right.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, True Texas Project and myself strongly support this bill, and I'm not going to read that. I am constantly amazed at how much sex is being pushed at our children today and at every possible avenue. You've already heard from others the damage that these sexualization things can do to children. I don't need to repeat that. This bill is a very simple solution to a huge problem. At the very least, our children should not be able to access this kind of content on their phones or their tablets or their computers. So that is why we support the bill. Louisiana has done it. It seems to be working. Other states are considering it. It is time for Texas to take the lead in protecting children. Please support the bill.
Members, are there questions? Jonathan Covey, we see that you are representing Texas values and you are for the bill.
Yes, Madam Chair.
You have 3 minutes.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Hall, members, my name is Jonathan Covey. I'm testifying in favor of HB 3570. We think this is a solid bill. It's a bipartisan bill that really does a good job of taking some of the best parts of the Louisiana bill, which was Act 440, and implementing it for our laws here in Texas. Sexually explicit and harmful materials, as you know, have a range of negative impacts on children. Research has shown viewing sexually explicit materials may negatively impact a child's expectations in a relationship, increase a child's health risks, interfere with healthy sexual development, promote risky sexual behavior. We appreciate the enforcement focus being liability to the parent or the guardian of a minor that was exposed. I think that's actually a very important element of this as well, partly being because, as we've seen, like enforcement with there was a act that was passed in 1998 that was never enforced. It was permanently enjoined, the Child Online Protection Act. However, before that, when they were trying to enforce some of these types of laws through either DAs or federal prosecutors, it required a lot of computer forensics to be able to show whether or not an image was transmitted through a site in a particular geographic area, and I think this puts the onus on those who are bringing the lawsuit, and I think it really just it kind of simplifies everything. Online pornography is extreme and graphic and only one click away from our children, and we would ask that you use the tools in your toolbox to protect children and by supporting this bill.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3570? If not, the testimony on House Bill 3570 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Schatzline to close on his bill.
Thank you, Chairwoman and members. Once again, I'd love to speak to the question that Representative Johnson spoke to. So this will be using geocoding. And so they'll be able to, like, I think I'm understanding your question correctly. And if it is too much of an advanced question for me to answer, I'll find out for you. But ultimately, with geocoding technology, they'll be able to see the IP address that that company is targeting. And that's how they would be able to know that it abides by Texas state law. Does that answer your question?
Representative Johnson?
So the issue would be, but that's why I was asking about your enforcement mechanism. Is the harmed party, are they supposed to sue the social media or website entity?
Yes.
And if they are, then does the agency or the application have like a arbitrary or arbitration clause or a form selection clause that says if you agree to use my software, you are giving me the ability to determine in what state we litigate? And so even though the party may be in Texas, if they can do that by their agreement, then it doesn't matter what laws we pass here because they can bypass our enforcement. So that's what was my question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll check on that for you. And also, we know that it's working in Louisiana right now with the amount of drops in well, really just that they've put that mechanism within those companies so far. But let me do the research and I'll get that back to you.
And then, and I don't want to interrupt your wrap up, but one other thing I had a question about on the enforcement and the definition where you talk about your definition, average person applying contemporary community standards. Are you envisioning that this is a decision that is made by 12 people as a jury? Are you envisioning that it's a decision made by a judge? Are you envisioning that something through arbitration? And that to me would be important to know if you are, again, putting this back in the purview of community standards, 12 people that come in unbiased on jury selection that get to determine the fairness of both places.
Yeah, and I'm very open to that. I think we can talk offline about even the process of that, but that's a great point. Let me think through that and I'll get you an answer.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. And you're right.
Thank you.
This is an issue that is significant. It's significant for the development of our youth, and I appreciate that you have attacked one issue without casting a really broad net on some other things. So
Absolutely. Thank you.
thank you, Chairwoman.
Any further questions, members of our?
Well, thank you once again. I believe the passage of this is going to ensure two things. I think first, it's holding pornographic companies accountable for targeting children. I think secondarily, it's just protecting the next generation from violent sexual content and being over-sexualized in general. With that, members, I ask for your favorable consideration, and I close.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Members, the chair moves to withdraw the substitute and to leave House Bill 3570 pending. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The substitute is withdrawn, and the bill will be left pending. Chair lays out House Bill 4777 and recognizes Author Representative Pletzer to explain her bill.
Thank you, Dean, Chairwoman Thompson, Vice Chair Hall, and the distinguished members of this committee. I'm honored to lay out House Bill 4777 before you today. School resource officers, or SROs, play a key function in supporting school safety and creating safe learning communities for all students. SROs must serve an increasingly diverse population of students with unique needs, including trauma and mental health needs, which affects their behavior and learning outcomes. SROs are becoming more commonplace throughout our state and are often school-age children's first introduction to law enforcement. They shape kids' lifelong attitudes and sentiments towards our police. HB 4777 empowers SROs with more education and a greater opportunity to be a healthy adult relationship in a child's life and a positive role model of good citizenship and public service, someone a child can trust and turn to for help. House Bill 4777 would include these effects of mental health condition, including grief and trauma on student behavior and evidence-based strategies to support a safe school environment as topics included in the initial school resource officer certification training. The bill is written to allow TCOL flexibility and discretion over the incorporation of these topics into the training and would not require an increase in the amount of hours required. TMPA and the Texas School Districts Police Chief Association are in support of this bill, and you will hear testimony from one of the chiefs representing the association momentarily. Members, children do not need a diagnosis or clinical disorder to experience trauma and mental health conditions. Children experience trauma and grief around many factors from their home life as well as at school. They may be dealing with illness of a parent, divorce, loss of a loved one, poverty, or feeling anxiousness around tests and projects, just to name a few. Members, I'm happy to answer any questions and respectfully reserve my right to close.
Members, any questions? Thank you. The chair calls up Shannon Hoffman, Shannon Doyle, Bill Avera. Shannon Hoffman. We show you representing the Hogg Foundation for Mental Health, and you're neutral on the bill.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, members. My name is Shannon Hoffman, and I am with the Hogg Foundation for Mental Health. Foundation has been working to improve the mental health and well-being of Texans for over 80 years through grant-making, research, and policy education. And we are providing information on House Bill 4777. We know that stress and trauma can affect various aspects of a student's experience in school, including academic performance, behavior, and mental health. Youth behavior stemming from unidentified mental health concerns or trauma can be often misunderstood as bad behavior. This issue is crucial for students with disabilities who often experience disproportionate rates of removals from their classrooms. Further research shows that children identified as having an emotional disturbance had higher rates of discipline than any other category of disability. The effects of punitive discipline can have adverse effects on school climate, often negatively affecting students' sense of safety, well-being, and their ability to learn. Prior to working in policy, I worked as a licensed clinician working with youth in a residential setting with kiddos that had mental health and substance use concerns. They attended a school-like setting during the week, and in one instance that I like to share, a young man had a seemingly out of nowhere outburst in class. It turns out that a word problem described a child getting reprimanded for not cleaning his room, and we found out he experienced some pretty intense physical abuse by his father for the same behavior. His reaction was an emotional response to that previous trauma. A reaction could have easily been suspension, expulsion, or unfortunately criminal justice involvement. However, because of the staff's training and education, we were able to recognize this, and he was able to de-escalate, process his reaction, and return to the classroom. While school resource officers are not expected to be mental health professionals, additional training and support are part of a strategy to ensure appropriate responses to youth having mental health concerns or experiencing trauma. This training is aligned with the National Association of School Resource Officers, who recommend that school resource officers should be knowledgeable about child development, including development of students with disabilities, positive discipline, and trauma-informed practices. Our hope is with increased training and support, unidentified mental health concerns, substance use, or trauma can be better recognized, and students can be connected with the appropriate resources and supports. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Thank you. Shannon Doyle, we show you National Association of Social Workers, Texas chapter, and you're for the bill.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Shannon Doyle, and I'm a graduate policy intern with the National Association of Social Workers, Texas, which represents over 5,000 social workers across the state. I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 4777 to amend the current training curriculum for school district peace officers and resource officers to include enhanced training on student mental health. We have greatly appreciated this committee's effort in studying youth mental health and safety during the interim, and the legislature's increased investments this session to support the mental health needs of students and teachers across the state. As you're aware, Texas students are facing considerable obstacles to learning, including significant mental health needs, school and community violence, and other personal crises. The interim report by this committee laid out several recommendations to address these issues, as well as improve coordination between agencies and law enforcement, which included, quote, enhanced training for peace officers. If school police officers are trained not just in crisis response, but also in understanding the mental health impacts of grief and trauma, they will be better able to identify triggering student behaviors and respond accordingly by using evidence-based interventions. As most of us in this room know, there is a significant shortage of social workers and mental health providers in Texas. Currently, the ratio of school social workers to students in Texas is 1 to 5,309, which falls incredibly short of the recommended ratio of 1 to 250. While we believe Texas should work on closing this gap, or at the very least have one social worker for every school resource officer in Texas, we understand that schools have limited resources to meet these standards. Therefore, it is essential that peace officers and/or resource officers who are on site are trained to recognize and respond accordingly to students experiencing mental health issues. Overall, we believe House Bill 4777 is one step towards making our schools more trauma-informed through evidence-based strategies. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Thank you. Bill Avera, we show you the Texas School District Police Chiefs Association, and you're representing yourself as well, and you're for the bill.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Vice Chair Hull, members of the committee. My name is Bill Avera. I do currently serve as the Chief of Police and Emergency Manager for Jacksonville Independent School District, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. I have over 40 years of law enforcement experience, including 20 in school-based policing in the last 20 years. Many things have happened during that time. In 2014-15, I was honored to serve on the TCO committee that formed the original House Bill 2684 that led to the 20-hour course that we are currently teaching our school-based law enforcement officers, whether they be contract from SROs or whether they be ISD police officers in this state. That bill required several things of our officers involved in how to understand the psychological and physiological development of the children, the mental health aspects of brain development and how that impacted their behavior, and that has been in force now since 2015. In 2019, we reviewed that bill and removed, this legislature did, the 30,000 student floor, and now that training is offered to all school-based law enforcement across this state. We believe that this bill is the next logical step. We know that many of our kids are facing trauma at home. In my own district, I have 2 youngsters that we work with quite frequently that watch their father murder their mother. And that's about as trauma-induced misbehavior as there is, and it's amazing how to see those children have basically shut down at some point after witnessing that trauma, and it's going to be a lifelong effort. So I really applaud Representative Plisa's efforts to add trauma-informed care. We need to involve all of our officers and all of our school employees on how to recognize signs, which we do in our district. This 20-hour course must be taken within the first 120 days of an officer's employment in the school, and we already have mental health trainings, de-escalation, crisis intervention, and so this would be the next logical step. We have over 300 officer departments in this state, 300 school-based law enforcement departments out of our 1,200, and we look forward to working with Representative Plisa and this committee to ensure that this trauma-based care is added to the curriculum for our school-based officers, and would be happy to answer any questions, and thank you once again.
Members, any questions? Thank you. Chair calls up Anna O'Quinn. Did I get your name right?
You did, which I'm impressed. That's rare, so thank you.
Perfect. So we show you Anna O'Quinn representing Girls Empowerment Network for the bill.
Exactly, yes. Hi, Chair Hull and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Again, I'm Anna O'Quinn. I'm the Mental Health Policy Fellow at Girls Empowerment Network, and we are testifying in support of this bill, HB 4777. At our organization, we ignite the power in girls by teaching them the skills to thrive and believe in their ability to be unstoppable. More specifically, we serve more than 2,000 Texas girls in grades 3rd through 12th, including programs in Austin ISD, Houston ISD, and Hayes ISD. Our organization has been thinking a lot about a troubling report from the CDC that was just released last month. It told us that teen girls are experiencing record high levels of violence, sadness, and suicide risk. In Texas alone, 44% of high school girls report signs or symptoms of depression. We know that trauma and grief is a major component of this mental health care crisis. Our Texas students have and unfortunately will continue to experience high levels of trauma in their lives. In the U.S. right now, more than 2/3 of children report at least one traumatic event by age 16. The detrimental effects of this trauma are well studied, and some of them have already been noted. We have short-term effects such as lower grades and absences in schools, and long-term effects such as heart disease and increased involvement with the juvenile justice system, or as you may have heard it been called, the school-to-prison pipeline. Giving school district peace officers and resource officers evidence-based trainings on these realities of grief and trauma and how it impacts students is a wonderful way to prevent these detrimental outcomes. The potential of the way these trainings can support our peace officers and our schools is endless. For example, peace officers could help identify students who are in need of additional mental health care support and refer them out to appropriate resources, or could safely de-escalate students who are exhibiting behaviors based on trauma responses. School peace officers deserve to be given the tools to understand the very real presence of grief and trauma in our schools. At our organization, we know that grief and trauma-informed care creates safer schools in Texas, and as we all agree right now, Texas students deserve to feel safe. Thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 4777? If not, testimony on House Bill 4777 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Plessa to close on her bill.
Thank you, Chairwoman and members, for carefully considering this bill supported by our schools and our law enforcement officials. I would like to thank all the witnesses that came here to testify, Chairman Lozano and Chairman Dutton for joint authoring this bipartisan piece of legislation. And I respectfully request your favorable consideration and humbly request this bill to be sent to local and consent calendars. And with that, I close.
Members, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Members, the chair moves to leave House Bill 4777 pending. Are there any objections? Chair hears none. The bill will be left pending.
Chair lays out House Bill 2673 and recognizes author Vice Chair Hull to explain her bill. And Vice Chair Hull, I asked Representative Lozano to lay out your committee substitute and recognize the Vice Chair to explain her committee substitute as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 2673 is the result of speaking with school districts, TEA, and parents about the safety and use of school-issued devices. This grants TEA rulemaking authority in the use of electronic devices so that the state can promulgate rules for districts on the use of devices. I have heard from many districts that want guidance from the state regarding their policies, and from parents that feel that their district is either unwilling or doesn't have the capacity to develop guidelines for the use of devices, and that they aren't provided enough information about the device's capabilities. House Bill 2673 strikes a balance in between districts' obligations and parents' responsibility as partners in education. TEA will develop standards for districts to ensure that school-issued devices meet certain standards, including minimizing data collection, ensuring software applications are not conducting mental health assessments or other assessments without parental consent, considering adjustments by age level on the use of electronic devices, consider appropriate restrictions on social media access on school-issued devices, and consider the use of an internet filter capable of notifying administrators who must then notify parents if a student accesses inappropriate or concerning content. The standards must include ensuring direct and informed parental consent for a student's use of software applications, ensure that parents are provided resources to understand cybersecurity risks and online safety regarding their child's use of the device, and ensure that the district has an appropriate officer to receive complaints from staff, parents, or students regarding student use of devices, including cybersecurity and online safety concerns. Finally, in addition to granting TEA rulemaking, HB 2673 requires districts, before transferring a device to a student, to adopt rules establishing programs, promoting parents as partners in cybersecurity and online safety, and requiring the installation of an internet filter that blocks and prohibits obscene material. The committee substitute includes language worked on with input from TEA to clarify some of these provisions. I'm happy to answer any questions and would like to reserve the right to close.
Members, are there any questions? Members, are there any questions? All right. The chair calls Carrie Moore and Lee Spiller. Mrs. Moore, we show that you are representing the Texas Educational 911 Citizen Defending Freedom, and yourself, and you are for the bill.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
3 minutes.
I've covered earlier that children need and crave boundaries in every area of their life. Our goal as adults, as parents, are to provide guardrails for them until they're ready to go without guardrails. This bill enables parents to get the help, or the grandparents they need to get the help to understand these kids coming home. I work with volunteers. That's my job, is to train volunteers. Many of our volunteers are grandparents. We don't, and I'm not a grandparent, so don't think I'm a grandparent, but I realize I don't understand half of the stuff that comes home, and I'm on top of things. Grandparents definitely don't understand when a kid brings home a Chromebook and says, oh, I have to do A, B, C, and D. They don't understand what that means. I realized the other day we were talking about a Dropbox in one of my meetings, and all of a sudden I had this flashback of my parents calling me going, can you come set the timer on my VCR? I was like, oh my gosh, I'm that person, because I don't know what you're talking about. We need help, and this bill does that. This bill prevents the loopholes that we may not see and we may not understand on the devices that come home with our kids. I'm very concerned that our kids are coming home with devices. That alone concerns me. But any bill that would enable more transparency, that would enable parents to feel more secure about what is coming home with their kids and how it's going to be used, and what will prevent the kids from finding the loopholes in there is just fantastic. The mental, emotional, the SEL sites, the things that come home that are grilling our kids over and over about their mental states. You know, we go to therapy. I've been in therapy for 40 years, and I still don't know sometimes why I feel the way I do. We're asking these kids over and over again how they feel, why they feel it. We're expecting them to be an adult on this topic, and they're not. They're kids. Not to mention, on half of these surveys, I don't know very many kids that over and over again are going to really assess, am I feeling more empathetic today than I was yesterday? They're going to go happy, 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 sad, happy, 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 sad. We can't depend on these things. So to prevent those from coming, to bring back to basics for our kids instead of focusing on these things, any bill that enables transparency with parents and our kids to get back to basics of the reading and the writing and the math, we support wholeheartedly. So thank you very much for writing this bill. I appreciate it.
Members, are there any questions? Lee Spiller, we show that you're representing Citizens Commission on Human Rights, and you're for the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Lee Spiller. I'm the Executive Director of Citizens Commission on Human Rights in Texas. You know, it's been a few years since I really looked at some of these apps. But in this world we live in now, there are apps that are put on one-to-one devices that really can intensely look into what kids are writing, homework assignments. One of the app makers used to talk about kids' personal journals containing actionable intelligence. I want you to think about that for a minute. Let's say you've got a 13-year-old daughter. Maybe she's found her first love interest. Maybe she says the wrong thing. And then she gets called into the principal's office. Right? That's the kind of technology we're talking about. And we do have to be very careful what we're doing. Some of these use keywords. Some of them claim to use AI or machine learning to say, you know, to tell whether a kid is depressed, self-harming, using drugs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If people are going to assess you that way, you ought to know about it. Your parents ought to know about it. Then there are the social and emotional apps. Up in North Texas, there's been an app called Rhythm that's been used in a number of schools. And it's emoji-based. Kids do a little emoji-based assessment of their mental state, emotional state, energy, physical, social. And what some parents didn't know early on was the thing also triggers alerts if the kids give the wrong answer, or, you know, a sad face or an angry face or a hungry after, you know, over a certain number of times. But it also has activities for the kids to do to deal with what they found. In other words, to us, it looks like a mental health app, right? You're doing an assessment and then you're getting activities to address what was found. Well, by golly, you ought to have parental consent for that. Plain and simple. And yet some school districts didn't. Some school districts, the answer was, well, yes, that's, you know, it's what's called an acceptable use policy. It's this thing the parents sign, giving general permission to use the school's technology resources. That's not good enough. So we like this bill because we think it takes care of that. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 2673? If not, the testimony on House Bill 2673 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Vice Chair Hull to close on her bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I close.
Members, are there any questions of the Vice Chair Hull? Members, the chair moves to withdraw the substitute and leave House Bill 2673 pending. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The substitute is withdrawn, and the bill would be left pending.
The chair lays out House Bill 3654 and recognizes Chair Thompson to explain her bill.
Madam Chairperson and members, this bill talks about the intent of this bill is to return the classroom to a safe and a productive space for students and teachers. It would require students who commit the following actions against teachers, school employees, or volunteers to be suspended: intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly causes bodily injury to a teacher, school employee, or volunteer; intentionally or knowingly threatens a teacher, school employee, or volunteer with imminent bodily injury; intentionally or knowingly causes physical contact with a teacher, school employees, or volunteer. Madam Chairperson, I'd like to, I'm available to answer any questions on Representative Yvonne Davis's bill, and I would like to reserve the right to close.
Members, are there any questions? The chair calls up Carrie Moore. Carrie Moore, we show you representing Texas Education 911, Citizens Defending Freedom, and yourself for the bill.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. Every time I come up here, I talk about how our kids can't read, they can't write. They're inundated with a lot of other things that have nothing to do with the basics of math, the basics of reading, the things that are going to enable them to have a self-esteem, to leave school, to get their own job, to get their own apartment, to have their own life. A reason for that I see is we're losing good teachers. The days of, and I'm not saying we don't have good teachers now, but we're losing good teachers. And violence in the classroom, I'm afraid, is a big contributor to that. I remember being in high school and having the same kids over and over again that would throw things or do those things, and they were just never reprimanded. And it was a waste of our time. And it's a waste of the kids' time, and it's a waste of the teachers' time. I like this bill. I think we need to defend our teachers, keep them safe, keep our children from having to see this over and over and over again. So I ask that you pass 3654. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3654? If not, testimony on House Bill 3654 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Chair Thompson to close on the bill.
Madam Chairperson and members, it is the legislature's job to give these schools and teachers all of the necessary tools to ensure their classrooms are safe and orderly learning environments for every student in the classroom. This bill would provide the principal, the school district, the latitude to suspend the student to a period of time they believe is sufficient depending on the gravity of the student's actions. I close.
Members, do you have any questions for Chair Thompson? Thank you. Members, the chair moves to leave House Bill 3654 pending. Are there any objections? Chair hears none. The bill will be left pending. The chair lays out House Bill 3917 and recognizes Chair Thompson to explain the bill.
Madam Chairperson and members, thank you. This bill seeks to improve a school district's ability to hold a parent accountable for not following the compulsory attendance law without reverting back to the way it was prior to 2015. This bill provides a tool for districts to amend by amending code for a fine imposed on parents to be waived if the parent completes an alternative requirement by the school district to attend counseling, training, programs, or other services designated by the school district. School districts are not required to offer any of these programs, but may elect to provide this alternative rather than a traditional fine or other punitive measures. These programs and services could be provided through state or local counseling resources, faith-based entities, or other entities as chosen by the school district. None of these changes would impact students or the other parts of the truancy law. And with that, I'm available for questions on this bill, Madam Chairperson, and would like to reserve the right to close.
Are there any questions? Okay, let's see. The chair calls up Paige Duggins-Clay. So we show Paige Duggins-Clay representing IDRA for the bill, but not testifying. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3917? If not, testimony on House Bill 3917 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Chair Thompson to close on this bill.
Members, I close.
Members, any questions? Okay. Members, the chair moves to leave House Bill 3917 pending. Are there any objections? Chair hears none. The bill will be left pending.
Chair lays out House Bill 2481 and recognizes its author, Representative Garcia, to explain her bill.
Thank you so much, Chairman Thompson, Chairwoman, Vice Chair Hall, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you House Bill 2481. When a child is removed from their parents by DFPS, relatives and family friends often step up to help provide a safe and loving home for these children. Kinship care results in better behavioral outcomes for children, allows them to stay connected with their families, community, and culture. And this is especially important given the traumatic results of being suddenly separated from your parents and being involved in the foster care system. However, kinship caregivers often lack the resources needed to provide support to children through this difficult transition. In my own case, my kinship caregiver when I was a child was my grandmother, who was on a pension. She had no source of income, and most of the kinship caregivers in this state receive only half of any type of financial support that's available for foster parents at this time. Kinship caregivers are also they also have barriers to accessing essential mental health services, which not only improve the well-being of the child, but also decreases the likelihood that their placement be disrupted. In January of this year, expert panel was appointed under the federal lawsuit recommended that DFPS develop a mobile crisis response program to decrease the number of children who end up without placement. At this time, 2 in 5 children without placement become disrupted from kinship care. What displacement means is either one, the kinship provider is unable to care for the child, or in my case, I ran away from my kinship home. Mobile crisis teams and intervention behavior or intensive behavioral health care services for kinship placements have proven to be successful in states like Iowa and Colorado. And I believe that this would greatly benefit foster children here in Texas as well. One thing that you'll see is a lot of my advocacy. I want Texas to be the #1 in everything. And so that's going to be one of my advocacies is making sure that we're a very loud voice for our foster children. House Bill 2481 would help increase kinship placement by providing virtual mental health care services. This mental health care will be available 24/7, 365 to caregivers and children in placement care and kinship placement. The bill also provides for in-person mobile intervention teams who can help families de-escalate situations and address mental health crises as they arise and before they get out of hand. I also want to point out that a very high number of children in care are undiagnosed with mental health issues, to include autism and Asperger's disorders. After working with DFPS, I've requested a committee substitute for House Bill 2481, which will fine-tune its language to leverage programs which are already in the budget under Health and Human Services, instead of requiring DFPS to go out and create another program. This was something that we were able to figure out was available, and that's what we want to start doing, is making sure that we're empowering the programs that are already in place to handle some of these special circumstances. And if there's no further questions, I reserve my right to close. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you. The chair calls Beverly Morris and Andrea Sparks.
You want to go first?
Beverly Morris, we show that you are representing Texas grandparents raising grandchildren and yourself, and you are for the bill.
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman Thompson, for allowing me to be here, and also members. I'm a grandmother, and I'm raising my 6 grandkids, and, it's very hard, and so I support this bill because I have one granddaughter, she's 14, and I've had my grandkids for 5 years, and she has a lot of trauma, and I've had to call out the police. I've had to call people out to come out, and they put her in a Georgetown Institute for Behavioral Health, and then Georgetown was like, well, this is not the place for her. So there's not a lot of help for grandparents who get children who have been through trauma. You know, it's my one daughter, these are her 6 kids, and these kids they've seen a lot. You know, the boyfriend pulled a gun, a rifle to their mother's head. So they have lots of trauma for things that I didn't know about. I'm finding out more now. So we have this virtual where they can come to my house at any point 24/7. This will be good. I mean, I've been trying to get my granddaughter into like a different type of environment where she's not even living at our home because she wants to be in control, because this is what she has done most of her, like 5 years. They were in control of all the other kids. Her sister is 15, so she wants to control me. But when I can call someone out and say, hey, I need help, like right now, there's no help, you know? And so that's why I know this bill is crucial for grandparents, because I don't receive enough money to take care of my 6 grandkids, but I have a friend who created Team Beverly, and this is what allows me to be able to even be here today, because they're taking care of those kids while I'm here. So I just really feel like this bill should be passed, because these kids are hurting. My grandchildren are hurting because of what they've seen in their lives, things that they're just really starting to share with me, some of the things even like right now after 5 years. And so, you know, when they go to school, there's trauma. The school doesn't understand. So every bill that I've heard here today, I was like, I should have signed up for every bill, because all these bills relate to these kids that they've been in the foster care system. And for the first 5 months, I didn't even know they were under CPS custody. So by the time I got them, no one told me how bad I didn't even know what trauma was, actually, to be honest, because I did raise 4 children, and their mother, she did have trauma, but I didn't know it, like when I was raising her, but I see it now. And so if I could help her with this trauma that she's having, it'll make her better for her future. Because if I don't fix this issue and be able to call someone at 24/7, it's going to continue, and she's going to be in the juvenile justice system.
Members, all the questions? Thank you. Andrea, it's good to see you.
Hi, good.
Andrea Sparks, I see that you are representing Buckner International, and you're for the bill.
Yes, I am, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you, members. Buckner International has been serving children and families for over 145 years. More and more, we are called to serve relative caregivers to try to keep kids out of the foster care system, and we serve them in our Family Hope Centers and our foster and kinship care programs. Just like Ms. Morris said, one of the most heartbreaking surprises that we find for these relatives and that we experience alongside them is the levels of trauma that the children come with when they come into their homes. Trauma from previous abuse and neglect, from their removal itself, from their homes, their parents, schools, friends, potential separation from siblings, all the things that can cause behaviors and mental health crises that make it impossible for grandparents to serve these kids that they love so much and they're trying to do the right thing by. And they come with untreated mental health issues and developmental delays. And I say it's a surprise because, like Ms. Morris just said, she's already raised 4 kids. You think you got this, And some of these relatives take children at their home that they already have children there, but they don't recognize the traumas right away, and they do come up, and then it's really a crisis. So we very much support this bill. We think that, right now it's so hard for these relatives to get the mental health services that they need for their kids and for themselves in dealing with the stress and, the change in the direction of their life. And I actually read your story in the newspaper. I just realized, and having to quit your job, and it's just stressful all around. So we really support this bill. I will say relying on existing resources is a good idea, but we're going to really need to get more providers to sign up under the existing programs. Those programs we have under the state of Texas with Star Health and others just don't have enough providers providing services, especially in rural areas. So we're going to have to really work hard on that, and I'm very heartened to see all the investments that have happened so far in mental health services in both the House and Senate budget bills. So maybe that'll help us there. I'll answer any questions y'all have.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much. Ms. Morris, thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 2481? If not, the testimony on House Bill 2481 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Garcia to close on her bill.
Thank you so much, Chair Thompson, Vice Chair Hull, and members. House Bill 2481 would ensure that kinship caregivers and the children in their care have access to mental health services they need to heal and to build loving, supportive homes that these children deserve. This bill is an important investment in our kinship placement and in our foster children. I remember when I was incarcerated as an 8-year-old, because I didn't know where my mommy was, it was my grandmother who came to get me. And to be a part of, this bill that can give support to those grandparents who, are giving over their lives all over again. I ask that you please consider a favorable referral of House Bill 2481 to local and consent calendars. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much. Members, the chair moves to leave House Bill 2481 pending. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The bill would be left pending.
The chair lays out House Bill 5195 and recognizes its author, Dean Thompson, to explain the bill.
Members, youth under the age of 17 post-certification often remain in juvenile detention facilities for lengthy periods of time awaiting trial in criminal adult court. These children should be afforded educational programming and services while they are housed in juvenile facilities awaiting trial. This bill seeks to ensure that children who have been certified to stand trial in adult courts for criminal prosecution in order to be detained in juvenile facilities pending those criminal proceedings to receive services. It requires an initial need assessment to be completed within 21 days, a written plan to ensure the child can make progress while they are awaiting trial, and it requires that a status report be conducted every 90 days to evaluate progress and make recommendations relative to the child's rehabilitative needs. I have a committee substitute that has a legislative council draft of the bill as filed, and I have a witness here to help answer any questions. I'd like to reserve the right to close, and I am available for questions. I'm going to have, I apologize, Madam Chairperson. I'm going to have this in the future.
Members, any questions? The chair calls up Rachel Hampton.
Hello, committee. Nice to see you again.
Rachel Hampton, representing Lone Star Justice Alliance for the bill.
Yes, ma'am. All right, this will be short and sweet, I promise, a little bit less than my other one. Less than 200 kids are certified to stand trial as adults in Texas each year. In the youth system, kids who are 14 and charged with capital murder or 15 and above for any other charge can be certified to stand trial as an adult. In 2013, the federal government and Texas permitted youth who are pending their conviction in adult court to stay in youth facilities. The reason for this is fairly obvious, but I'll say it. 14-year-olds under federal law and best practice should not be mixed with adults. The placement just isn't appropriate. All around Texas, juvenile boards have passed rulings that allow our youth to stay in youth facilities pending trial. Services for youth in facilities are governed under Human Resources Code Section 221.002. The guidelines outlined under this statute demand a minimum standard of care, including access to education, mental health screening, and substance abuse treatment. Arguably, the current statute as it stands does not explicitly include providing this minimum standard of care to youth who have been certified for transfer to the adult system. Several counties have confirmed that this is the case in practice anecdotally. This bill clarifies any ambiguity in statute that the HRC provisions apply to all children who are in facilities, whether they are under juvenile or adult jurisdiction. This is critically important for these 200 youth or so because due to the nature of delays in trial, these kids can be held for sometimes up to 2 years waiting for trial in adult court. For example, LSJA had a client in Dallas that spent over a year in a juvenile facility while awaiting transfer to stand trial. She was ultimately released due to our advocacy after about a year, but that case is still pending to be heard in September, 2.5 years after, which is typical for this case. And not everyone has access to advocacy services. We don't know the full scope of the problem as we don't have a centralized data keeping for this particular request, but we have heard from at least 3 counties anecdotally that this is an issue, that there are youth not receiving education and treatment that they are entitled to. These kids have not been found guilty, and in the event of a non-guilty verdict, we want to make sure that they don't return to the community having wasted 2 years in a facility without receiving any education or other services critical to their success upon release.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 5195? Hearing none, testimony on House Bill 5195 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Dean Thompson to close on her bill.
Madam Chairperson, members, I close.
Members, do you have any questions? Members, the chair moves to leave House Bill 5195 pending. Are there any objections? Chair hears none. The bill will be left pending. The chair lays out House Bill 3931 and recognizes Chair Thompson to explain the bill.
Madam Chairperson and members, this is Chairman Dutton's bill. Back in 2015, the legislature enacted House Bill 2398, which aimed to address students who are dealing with truancy. That bill decriminalized truancy and provided a staggering fine for parents for contributing to truancy conduct. However, since 2015, concerns have been voiced that truancy have increasingly become troublesome and schools are not reporting these students in a timely fashion. I want to tell you, Chairman Dutton does intend on having a committee substitute draft for this particular bill. The committee substitute would make the following changes. In Section 1 of the bill as introduced, introduced would be added back in. The rationale is that 19-year-olds that have been re-enrolled in school and are not coming to school, this part of the law has followed schools to threaten this, to get kids to attend, and if not, allow schools to withdraw disruptive students from their schools. This 19-year-old who might possibly have no chance of graduating in any sort of quick timer frame can turn into disruptive students in the school environment. He's going to add Section 2 of the introduced bill would be completely removed, and Section 3 of the introduced bill would remain the same because it relates to a Class C misdemeanor, which would be a fine up to $500 by allowing a justice of the peace discretion. Judges would have the ability to assess each situation on a case-by-case basis and assess a fine based on the financial ability or other factors contributing to the student's failure to attend. Section 4 and would change to include the phrase "without excuse." Section 8 of the bill would change to say the Commissioner's Court of a county shall designate one or more justices of the precinct in the county. The rationale he indicates is this would allow for bigger cities and counties to have more than one truancy court rather than just one. The committee substitute will also include a provision that will repeal Section 65.051 and 65.053, which would remove prosecutors from dealing with truancy. And the rationale indicates that prosecutors have more important cases to deal with, and they currently do not have the capacity to deal with these matters. If any witnesses would like to see any further changes or have any additional issues, they can speak to the staff of Chairman Dutton's office who have been working on this bill. Madam Chairperson, I'd like to reserve the right to close on this bill.
Members, any questions? Chair calls up Carrie Moore, J.R. Woolley, Zenobia Joseph.
I'm only one of those three.
So J.R. Woolley, show you representing Justices of the Peace and Constables Association and self, and you're neutral on the bill?
That's correct. We have been working with Representative Dutton's office and went over all of the concerns that we've had. The committee substitute takes care of a lot of them. The first part with the 19-year-olds, those are the students that are the problems. And to take that section out that was removed in the original bill allows those students to stay in and still be a problem. And if they're not going to school, they're 19 years old, let the school get rid of them. I think that's a pretty fair course of action to take there. As I said before, the Class C misdemeanor part, that's a great tool for us on the bench to use because it gives us that discretion to go from $1 to $500 based on the parent that's in front of us. On the court, the commissioner's court designating one or more, just as the dean laid out, in the larger counties where you have, I mean, if you can imagine Harris County, only one of those JP courts being the truancy court, that would be, you probably have to create a whole new court just to deal with truancy in Harris County. But if they designate one in a more rural county, it allows that JP to become kind of a truancy expert because that county may not see as much truancy. So then that judge would be much more versed in it. But the changes that we've discussed, I think this makes this a very good bill. The other thing that I did want to talk about was the very last thing, and removing the county attorney portion. So right now, a school district has to go through the district or county attorney's office before that gets filed with the JP, the municipal court. Some district attorney's offices are too busy to do that, and it has led to a decrease in truancy cases coming to our courts. So it's a civil matter, so why are we having the prosecuting attorney's office involved in truancy? It's an extra hurdle that I think is holding the school districts back from putting these kids in front of us and getting them into a program or something that resolves the issue. And again, we're not going to get all of them, but if we get a few, then we won. So I think that's it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Yes, Representative Johnson.
Thank you so much. On page 2, under section 3C, where it takes out the requirement that it's $100 for the first offense, $200 for the second offense. I worry about money, and I worry about many of the folks that are having truancy issues. The parents don't have money to give, and a lot of times it's the kid doing something that the parent's being held responsible. You mentioned $100 to $500. Is it your position that if we do that and cross out these funds, that you as the JP can make the determination whether it's a first, second, third, fourth offense on what the appropriate amount of a financial penalty is?
100%.
Do you worry about some folks that would just say for everybody that comes in the door, it's $500 because they're trying to put a money screws to them?
I'd be remiss if I said I didn't think that was an issue. Yeah. But I think that's a training issue that we as the justice, or our Justice Court Training Center can address and really make that distinction that, hey, we really need to be looking, and we need to look at every single case, right? Because a speeding case, you're in the same boat. You know, that person may not have it. So and as I said earlier, we have a bunch of other tools we can use as well.
And it feels like the tone of this bill is to give parents an opportunity to work with the court, do petitions for non-disclosure. It doesn't feel like the intent of this bill is to get the parents. Do you feel like that tone of the passage of this bill would be received by JPs to say, hey, we're trying to do this a little differently, not impose financial fines, and trying to do kind of a safety net here for the parents so that they're not additionally financially penalized and stigmatized for an issue on truancy?
I do, and I think that what you see now is a lot of the courts that are doing this, that are doing it well, are already doing a lot of these things. So if they're in there for a second offense, but the parent is, working 3 jobs to try and make ends meet, the judges are already waiving the fines or letting them do some community service or other things to meet that and not just hitting them. So I think what this bill does is really magnifies or multiplies what the good courts are doing to the other courts who maybe just don't really know. And now here's the bill that says how you do it.
Sounds like a great thing.
I agree.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Members, any other questions? Oh, Chair Thompson.
Is there an appeal process? Say a justice of the peace just ignores a person's inability to pay and they hit them with a big fine. Is there an appeal process in place?
You can appeal it up to the county court of law.
Okay. But you got to pay to get there.
Well, you can. You can file an inability.
Pro bono?
It's not pro bono.
They got to represent themselves if they can't hire a lawyer.
I'm sorry?
They have to represent themselves if they can't hire a lawyer.
De novo. Or not de novo.
Pro bono.
Pro bono would be for free. It's pro se.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, pro se.
Pro se. And a majority of the people we see are pro se.
I'm sorry.
Which we're the people's court and
Yeah.
the people that are coming to us. So it's.
Thank you so much.
Members, any other questions? So Carrie Moore showing registered against the bill but not testifying. And Zenobia Joseph registered neutral on the bill. Were you Zenobia? Okay. So we show you Zenobia Joseph representing yourself, and you're neutral on the bill.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I'm Zenobia Joseph testifying neutrally on 3931. And specifically, I heard the bill layout, and I just wanted to ask specifically, before students are actually removed from the classroom, to have some type of virtual option where they can either see the lesson or hear the lesson and be given an opportunity to make up the work. And I would also ask Representative Dutton to include a Maslow's hierarchy of need or some type of assessment that actually looks at the students' basic needs to see what it is that's causing them to be truant. I'm a former teacher of the year, and so I have a heart for the African-American males in particular, and would just call to your attention the report that was a longitudinal study of 1 million students in Texas in 2011 called Breaking Schools Rules by Dr. Tony Fabello. And of the students that were removed from the classroom, 83% of the African-American males actually received a discretionary removal. And so I am asking that you actually take a look at the report and recognize that even though the fine may be removed or abated in some way, that there's an academic problem that's causing students oftentimes not to be in the classroom. And I think all too often we figure out ways to get them out of the classroom as opposed to recognizing the basic needs and also what their academic needs are as well. And so I support the bill, but I do think it can be improved if we just take a look at the underlying issues. And I agree, there are parents that probably won't be able to pay the fine, and so then we're penalizing the parents who are probably doing the best that they can. If you have any questions, I'll gladly answer them at this time.
Members, any questions? No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3931? If not, testimony on House Bill 3931 is now closed, and the chair recognizes Chair Thompson to close on the bill.
I close.
Members, any questions? Members, the chair moves to leave House Bill 3931 pending. Are there any objections? Chair hears none. The bill will be left pending.
Members, that concludes the committee business for today. Are there any announcements? If not, Vice Chair Hull moves that the Select Committee on Youth Health and Safety stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The committee stands adjourned.